אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, והריח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים בארץ. אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל. יד ימינך, יומם השם לא יככה, והריח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, והריח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי אוי מהארדל, מהשפות ירים אביון. נתיבי עמו, כי השם אלוקינו המקביל לשבת. אוי בשמיים ובארץ, אוי מקימי מהעפר דל, מהשפות ירים אביון. אוי להושיב עם נתיבים, נתיבי עמו. Oy bekimi me'afardal me'ashmod yarim evyon oy lehoshivim im nedivim im nedivei amor. Oy lehoshivim im nedivim im nedivei amor. Im nedivei amor.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Hold on one second here. Let me just set this up. Let's try this way. There we go. Let's try that way. All right, we'll just start with that for a second. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. This is Parashat Vaera. So we're going to be in Sefer Shemot, in the book of Exodus. We're going to be covering, let's see. We're starting in Exodus 6, and we're basically going through the middle of Exodus 9. And welcome Yirma, welcome Bruce. So we have a lot of participants this time, Shalom. Right in the studio, which is very nice. And I see we have a number on Facebook and YouTube, which is also very, very nice. So let me get rid of this banner. And I suppose we could dig right in. So I'm going to just share the screen. I'm going to ask you guys to mute yourselves. Bruce, I'm just going to mute you, but you guys can unmute when and if you want to ask questions. I really love and encourage participation. I really do. I think if it's a discussion, you know, I've never seen myself as someone who knows everything and is just teaching. We're just all learning together. That's the way I see it. And so I really appreciate, you know, when people have something to say and ask questions and add comments and point things out that maybe I've never realized before. I cannot tell you how many times I've learned from other people pointing things out and changed my opinion. And that's why you'll always hear me say, or I always try to say when I'm giving my opinion in Torah, I'll always say things like, to the best of my knowledge, or as I understand it right now, or as far as I can see it, because we don't know. We're not prophets. We're very disconnected from our ancient culture. We're very disconnected from our ancient language, and we're constantly learning and assimilating new knowledge. So let's all learn together. Let's dig into this week's Parsha. And I will start reading. If anyone would like to read lines in Hebrew, I know Bruce likes to do it sometime, then you're more than welcome to. Bruce, do you want to start us off, actually? Okay, I don't hear Bruce. I don't know if it's a technical problem or something else. So I'll start off then. So we are we're starting in Exodus, basically the beginning of Exodus 6. I think there was one verse from last week's Parsha. In Exodus 6, the very last verse of the Parsha, and then we start in Vaera, but we'll start, let's see, here we go, in verse 6. And it's always important to point out that the chapters and verses are artificial. And really, if we look in the actual Torah, and the actual manuscripts of the Torah, the texts of the Torah, what we see is, we'll either see a Samech, which is a Parasha Stuma, or we'll see a Peh, which you can see down here, which is a Parsha Ptucha. And so that's kind of like, you could call it like maybe a paragraph break would be the Stuma, and a ptucha would be like maybe a chapter breaker, or something like that. Oops, I just pressed on that by mistake, right? So and if you look at it in an actual Torah scroll, so at the end of the stuma, you'll see basically a break, and at the end of the ptucha, you'll see like a new line started after the end of the ptucha, and those are really the chapters, or the sections in the chapters. And so what we see is, so last week we went up to the last week's parsha ended in 6:1. Well, that's weird. Why should it end at the beginning of chapter 6, right? But if we look at the Hebrew text here, right, we see, okay, well, there's at the end of 5. Whoops, where is it? Oh, my cat is going crazy. At the end of 5, okay, we don't have any marking here, and then we go to chapter 6, and at the end of the first verse we have a samech. That's basically a kind of a paragraph end, right? So really, for whatever reason, when the people, or the person in the Middle Ages who laid out the chapter and verse, for whatever reason they chose to include this in a new chapter, right? These chapters were laid out by a Christian, right? They were laid out by a Christian monk. I can't remember his name offhand. I'd have to look it up. Stephen something or other. And so these are the Christian layout, the chapter and verse, right? But there are basically chapter markings, or paragraph and chapter markings in the Hebrew text, and that's this. This is the samech and the parsha stuma, which is like a small break, and the parsha ptucha, which is like a big break, right? So we see here really that really this should have been in the part of the last chapter. I don't know. We'd have to go back and see why. Well, what was the guy's name again? Person who made chapter and verse. No. Who divided them? Stephen. There it is. That's the name. Stephen Langton, an Archbishop of Canterbury. I think he was the first one to do it, right? Stephen Langton. So at any rate, so we have to go by the what it says in the Hebrew, right? Not in the English parsha breaks. Okay, so that being said, we're going to start here. Okay, just to get context, where were we? Well, in chapter 5, so Moshe had gone to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go," and Pharaoh said, basically, they can go. You, Moshe, can go to HE double hockey sticks, and your people can get back to work. In fact, they could do more work, right? So we saw that they now had to go out and fetch their own teven, their own straw, and make their own bricks, and they had to still stick to the same quota of bricks, right? So the situation actually got worse, and that's where we left it, right? And we saw here, we could just read through this very quickly without commentary, just to get the context. So Exodus, the end of last week's chapter, we'll start from here. Exodus 5:15. ויבואו שוטרי בני ישראל ויצעקו אל פרעה לאמור למה תעשה כל לעבדיך. So the capos over the children of Israel cried out to Pharaoh, saying, "Why have you done this to your servants?" Right? What were they doing to their servants? They were basically, Pharaoh's taskmasters were beating the Israelite capos to make sure that the Israelites did their slave labor. Okay. תבן אין ניתן לעבדיך ולבנים אומרים לנו עשו והנה עבדיך מוכים וחטאת עמך. So you're not giving, I'll just paraphrase, you're not giving any more straw to your slaves, right? And you're asking us to make the same amount of bricks, and us well, they translate it as officers, right? But they were really like the capos in the concentration camps, right? So I gave this analogy last week. You had the overlords, the Nazi guards, like the SS, and then you had Jews that were appointed to rule over their own people, and they would answer to the SS guards. And these capos in the concentration camps, they were the ones who often would carry out punishments and enforce the rules and enforce the slave labor, et cetera, et cetera. So it's exactly the same thing. So you have the Nogshim, who are Pharaoh's taskmasters. They're asking the Jewish shotrim, the officers or the capos, to rule over the Jews, or to basically oversee the Jews to make sure they get all their work done. And when the Jews aren't getting all their work done, Pharaoh's taskmasters are beating the Jewish capos. Very similar to the concentration camps, right? So not a pleasant situation. Okay. Vayomer nirpim atem al ken atem omrim nelecha nizbacha liyahweh. Okay. And he said, so Pharaoh responds, you guys are lazy. You guys are slackers, basically, right? And that's why you say we're going to go and sacrifice to Yahweh. And so get back to work. And just as I said, you have to produce the same amount of bricks, even though I'm not going to give you, even though Pharaoh is no longer going to give the Israelites the teven, the straw, to make the bricks. They have to go out and search for their own straw. Okay, basically he doubled or tripled their work. They had to go out and search for the straw instead of just make the bricks. They had to search for the straw and then make the bricks from the straw. Verse 19, and so basically, again, it's just repeating that they had to make the same amount of bricks. Okay, verse 20. So these capos, these taskmasters, Jewish taskmasters over the rest of the Jews, ran into Moshe and Aaron as they were coming out from speaking to Pharaoh. And what did the taskmasters say to them? V'yomru elehem yirei Yahweh elechem v'yishpot asher ivashtem et arechenu v'einei Pharaoh. So they said, now this one I'll translate more word for word, and they said to them, may God see what you're doing. Basically, literally, may God look at you, or may God look, okay, upon you, okay. May God see what you're doing. May God look upon you. Wishbot and judge. That you've made our odor stink. You've made us malodorous. You've given us a stink before be'enei Paro, in the eyes of Pharaoh, be'enei avadav, in the eyes of his servants. And what you've essentially done is you've put a sword in their hand to kill us, right? So basically, what the shotrim, the taskmasters, the capos over the Jews are saying to Moshe and Aaron is, okay, at least we were slaves before, but now, because of what you've done, you came and asked the people to go, and Pharaoh's response, increasing the labor, right? So basically, what you've done is you've now given them an excuse to kill us, because if first of all, you've made our situation worse, and second of all, if we don't come up with the same amount of bricks as we're supposed to, then that's an excuse for them to kill us. I mean, the analogies between this and let's say the concentration camps in Germany is really amazing, right? Forced labor, Jewish taskmasters, SS guards ruling over them, and them having to do this incredible amount of labor, and then if they don't do it, the constant threat of death, right? So I don't know if it's quite as bad as the concentration camps. That was pretty bad, but it definitely was not a good situation. Okay, so then Moshe, right? Moshe was just following God's instructions. So Moshe, what does Moshe do? Moshe goes back to God. So the taskmasters, the capos, complain to Moshe. Moshe complains to God, right? Yeshav Moshe el Yahweh v'yomer Adonai lama herota l'am hazeh lama zeh shelachtani. And so Moshe comes back and says, why have you done these? Why have you done evil to this people? Why have you done this bad thing to these people? And then he tacks onto it, lama zeh shelachtani, and why'd you send me, right? We had this whole thing earlier. We saw when Moshe was first chosen, he wanted nothing to do with it, right? He refused twice. And after he refused the second time, God got so mad that he said, okay, I'm going to send Aaron with you, right? And now Moshe, even though he's already been chosen, still tacks this on. Like, why did you send me? He still does not want this job. He doesn't want anything to do with this, right? He thought he was going, he was kind of forced into this job of saving Israel, and never wanted it. And now he does exactly what God says, and the situation doesn't get better. No, it gets worse, right? And so Moshe says, why did you even send me, right? And if you remember, that was something very explicitly that ticked God off earlier, right? So we saw it. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, right? But basically, God gets angry. Moshe first refuses; he doesn't want the job, And then God says, "Don't worry, I'm I basically I will help you speak." And then Moshe says, "No, I really, really don't want the job." And then God gets angry, and then appoints Aaron to be basically his helper, right? So now Moshe is still at it, right? Even though he knows that God wants him, has chosen him, Moshe is still at it, trying, complaining about this role that he really wants not much to do with. Okay, verse 23. מאז באתי אל פרעה לדבר בשמך הרע לעם הזה ואצל לו הצלת את עמך. Now he's actually kind of getting a little bit harsh with God, right? He says, since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, הרע העם הזה, it's the situation has gotten worse for the people. The situation has gotten bad for the people. ואצל לו הצלת, and you certainly did not save these people, right? He's getting a little bit snitty with God, as a matter of fact, right? He's really kind of, he's kind of like letting God have it a little bit, right? Which is kind of a strange thing to do, but we see this a lot with the patriarchs. And here we are. This is the last verse of last week's parsha, and this is actually, again, we see this really belongs to the previous paragraph, right? Because there's no parsha stuma, there's no samach at the end. So really, this first verse, even though in what's his name again, Stephen Langton's separation into chapters and verses, even though he puts this in a new chapter, in the Hebrew we see that here's the samech, the parsha stuma, you could say the paragraph end comes after this first verse. So really, this verse belongs with the previous chapter, not with this new chapter. Okay, but I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of polemic why they did it, or maybe he just felt it belonged here more. At any rate, so this is the last verse from last week's parsha. Okay. ויאמר יהוה אל משה, אתה תראה אשר אעשה לפרעה כי ביד חזקה ישלחם וביד חזקה יגרשם מארצו. So Yahweh, what does he respond to Moshe? He doesn't get mad or anything like that, and he certainly doesn't excuse himself for what he's done. He said, now you'll see what I'm going to do to Pharaoh, because biyad hazaka yishalchim, he's going to send them out with a strong hand. Biyad hazaka yigarashem yatzo, and with a strong hand, he's gonna force them out of his land. Basically, strong hand meaning he's gonna use all his power to get them the heck out, right? Just as now Pharaoh is using all his power to keep the Israelites in, by the end of this whole thing, Pharaoh is going to be using all of his power to get them out, right? So what we see is something really interesting, right? So why is God doing this? Why, right? There's a lot of things going on here. First of all, we could say, well, maybe the question is like this, right? So why, when God first gets involved, does the situation get worse and not better? Right? Why does it get worse and not better? Why does God allow Moshe to think that the situation is getting worse? Why does he allow the Israelites to think that the situation is getting worse, or see that the situation is getting worse? It's very strange, right? You would think that God, who is now basically reconnecting with his people, right? There hasn't been any prophecy since the time of Jacob and Joseph, not that we know of, right? He's reconnecting with his people hundreds of years later, approximately 200 years later, and so why is and he wants to show that he's their God. He wants to show that he can save them, and he tells Moshe what to do. I mean, he's God, right? He should know what the outcome is, right? I mean, he couldn't be so naive, right? God is certainly not naive, right? He couldn't be so naive that he would think that this would make the situation better, right? Or that's already getting into philosophy. We won't get into that, but certainly what happens is the first thing that the first interaction that God has with Moshe and Aaron in the Israelites is actually makes the situation worse, right? It's crazy. Why would God allow such a thing to happen? So, any ideas? Anyone want to say anything? Anyone have any thoughts on that? It's kind of weird, right? God gets involved, the situation gets worse. Pharaoh makes the situation worse, not better, right? So, all right. Well, if anyone wants to say anything, please let me know. But I'll give you, my idea. First of all, we know that God wants to make the situation bad so he can have an excuse to punish Pharaoh even more, right? He says that he's going to make Pharaoh's heart stubborn in order that that he can multiply the signs and wonders in Egypt. In other words, that he can really show his force in order to finally destroy Egypt and free the Israelites. Right. So maybe that's an element there, but I think there's another element that's going on, and it's kind of like I don't know. I guess we'd call it I don't know, maybe like the law of inertia. Sometimes things have to get worse and hit rock bottom before they get better, and that's just all part of the process, right? So a lot of times, I don't know what would be an analogy. Let's say we're hitting, someone is hitting rock bottom in their life, or let's say maybe each of us at one point of our lives has hit rock bottom for one reason or another, right? As that person is going down towards rock bottom, at a certain point, they have a realization that, okay, I'm heading towards rock bottom. I've got to do something to change it around, right? I've got to change the situation here, right? But if they have that realization, right, there's the inertia or the direction they're being pulled is still downwards at that time. Before the counteracting force, which is their realization, the new situation that they want to create, takes effect. First the old situation has to kind of reach its maximum, or first it kind of has to be slowed down before it can stop and turn around in the other direction. It would be like, what would be an example? Let's say you're on the highway, right? And you see you're heading, you're about to miss your exit or something like that, right? And you slam on the brakes, okay? Well, when you slam on the brakes, the car doesn't come to an immediate stop, right? So that you can get off the exit, right? Or let's say, even better yet, would be a U-turn, right? Let's say you want to make a U-turn, right? You decide you want to make a U-turn, okay? So you slam on the brakes. Well, the brakes are not going to bring you to an immediate stop, right, for you to make the U-turn. It's going to take another second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds for you to come to a complete stop in order to make the U-turn and turn around, right? But you realize that you wanted to make the U-turn, a couple seconds before you were actually able to make the U-turn. You realized you wanted to make the U-turn. You hit the brakes. It took 5 seconds to slow down, and then you were able to make the U-turn. That's just the nature of the world. That's the nature of physics. I could even, if we wanted to, I could even get into physics, but I won't go in that direction. But basically, I think that's what we're seeing here, right? So the Israelites are heading towards rock bottom. Remember, when they first came to Egypt, they were in a very good situation. Yosef was second in command, right? He was beloved by Pharaoh. He was the head. He was in charge of pretty much everything in all of Egypt. Pharaoh trusted him with basically the safety and the economic security of his entire nation, right? And then we see that in the beginning of the book of Exodus, there arose a pharaoh in Egypt or a king in Egypt who did not know Yosef, right? Things started changing over the generations. New kings arose. They forgot exactly who Yosef was, all he had done, and therefore they forgot who the Israelites were. And so the Israelites kind of slowly but surely fell out of favor. And so their situation in Egypt was going down and down and down and down, right? They were heading towards rock bottom. It was sinking, right? But God didn't stop it in the middle, right? Because things sometimes have to reach their natural conclusion. They sometimes have to reach their natural end before they can turn around, right? Why didn't God get involved? As soon as let's say 50 years after Joseph died, right? And say, okay, it's time to get out of here. The situation's not so great anymore here in Egypt. We're going to get you out. No, he stayed silent, right? God literally stayed silent. We have no indication of any prophecy. Basically, after Yaakov, right? Yaakov is the last prophet. None of the sons of Yaakov are prophets. None, right? They don't speak directly to God. Not that I can think of offhand. Joseph has dreams, right? But he doesn't speak. He interprets and interprets dreams, but he doesn't speak directly to God. So there's no prophecy for hundreds of years. Okay, we'll get to the actual amount when the time comes. And then Moshe is born, and now Moshe becomes the next prophet in Israel since Yaakov, right? We don't know of any other prophet between Yaakov and Moshe. So the situation had gotten worse and worse and worse. It was heading downhill, and then at a certain point, approximately 200 years later, God decides to seize it, or God, sees that it's time to intervene. The situation has already gotten pretty bad. The Israelites are already enslaved, right? Let's see, where does that start? And we go back to Exodus 1, just to be a little bit precise. Right, so here, right here in Exodus 1:11, right? That's where the book of Exodus mentions it. Says, Hakham Melech hadash al Mitzrayim, after some new king. We don't know which king it is, right? Ostensibly, it's this. It's the Pharaoh that whose daughter adopted Moses, right? We can assume it is, right? So here, the Israelites in Exodus 1:11 are already enslaved, right? And so they're enslaved for a while, because this is when Moses is born. So Moses is well, we can even figure this out, right? I love working on this number stuff, right? So we know that Moses is born during this period, right? Moses first orders the midwives, Shifra and Puah, who we spoke about last week extensively, to kill all the males. Well, that doesn't work. They refuse to do that, and so then he orders all of his people to throw all of the males into the river, into the Nile. And it's in this situation that Moses is born, right? And the Israelites are already enslaved, right? We don't know how long they're enslaved, but they've already been enslaved by this time, okay? Well, how old is Moses? How old is Moshe? Well, then Moshe grows up while the Israelites are being enslaved. He sees the Egyptian man beating the Israelite, kills the Egyptian man, and then the next day knows that that's been found out, flees to Midian, gets married to his wife Tzipporah, has a child, Gershom, right? And then eventually is shepherding the flocks of Yitro, and comes out to the mountain of God, right? We have the burning bush, and then Moshe goes back and tells Pharaoh to free the Israelites. Well, how old is Moshe at that time? It says explicitly that Moshe is, anybody? It says explicitly in, I think we're going to see it in the next chapter, that Moshe is 80 years old, okay? That means that the Israelites have been enslaved for at least 80 years. From when Moshe was born, they were already enslaved. We saw that because Moshe was born during the slavery. That's why his mother put him in the teva, in the ark. And now when Moshe goes back to Pharaoh, it says explicitly that Aaron is 83 years old, and that Moshe is 80 years old, right? So the Israelites have been enslaved for at least 80 years, right? So that's a long time. Why didn't God get involved, as soon as, in the time that Moshe was born, like in that era when that Pharaoh, right? Because that Pharaoh then dies. That's why Moshe is able to go back to Egypt, right? Actually, it's called back, but the Torah tells us that Pharaoh died, and all the people who were trying to kill him died, right? And so why didn't God get involved when at the time that Moshe was born? Already the Israelites were enslaved. Already the firstborn were being thrown into the river, et cetera, et cetera. Because things have to meet their logical conclusion. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom and learn the lessons from hitting rock bottom before you can turn around and kind of, how can we say, shed your skin and metamorphosize into the next version of who you are. And we're talking about that now on the national basis, right? The people of Israel, they had to go through a certain process, right? They had to kind of hit a rock bottom and learn all of the lessons that they had to learn, all of the pain and the suffering, which pain and suffering it's unpleasant, but it's not always bad for us in the long run, right? It teaches us a lot about ourselves. It teaches us a lot about the world, teaches us a lot about life, teaches us a lot about God. It teaches us a lot about what's important, what's not important, right? So there's a certain process. Things have to hit a certain process or have to reach a certain conclusion before they're turned around. And I think that is the explanation in my eyes as to why when God first got involved, or shall we say Moshe's first interaction with Pharaoh, the situation actually got worse before getting better. So if you think of it like, again, that analogy, okay, of making the U-turn, okay. So at a certain point, God gets involved. That's basically God hitting the brakes on the car, right? But when God hits the brakes on the car is still moving forward. It takes a couple of seconds to slow down. That's inertia. And when there's a force applied against the inertia of the car, then it can decelerate the car until the acceleration. Now, talking a little bit of basic physics, basic mechanics, right before the car comes to a complete stop. And then if you continue pushing in the opposite direction, applying force in the opposite direction, in this case, turn around, make the U-turn, then it can go back in the other direction, right? So God, if you could think of it like God God interacts here, or Yahweh interacts here with the Israelites, just before they're about to hit the brick wall. He hits the brakes. The brakes don't stop immediately. The brakes don't stop the car immediately. The car still continues towards the brick wall, but it stops, just before, let's say, it hits the brick wall, and then it can turn around. And that's exactly what's happening here. When God gets involved, the situation still has to bottom out before it can turn around in the opposite direction. That's just physics, okay? And you can call it, let's say, spiritual physics, or you can call it just the law of the universe, right? Let's say you have, again, we'll use the example of rock bottom. Let's say somebody is, I thank God have never had any of this for myself and my family, but so I only know indirectly. But let's say someone is a drug addict or something like that, right? And their situation is getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and they realize they're reaching rock bottom, right? And right before, let's say they die, or right before they kill themselves or something horrible like that, they say, "This is it. If I don't stop now, I'm going to die," right? And they say, "Okay, I'm going to turn my life around." Okay, and they try to turn their lives around, but they're still being pulled so much in the direction that they're going to go a little bit more down until the force that's trying to turn them around in the opposite direction, that's trying to pull them up, is gonna take effect and be able to turn it around. That's kind of a rule of life. I can give you another analogy. I remember I used to teach school. I taught school both in the United States and in Israel. And Shabbat Shalom, Ricky and April. And Ricky and April will speak tomorrow. Okay. Just text me again tomorrow morning, as we said. I used to teach school, and I remember every so often I would get a kid who, just not necessarily a bad kid, but let's say a kid who just talked a lot in class, right? And let's say I had to tell the kid, you can't talk in class, and I had to punish him, and maybe I had to punish him a little bit harsher, and then punish him a little bit harsher when he wouldn't stop. And finally, let's say at a certain point, I said, "Listen, if you don't stop talking in class, I don't know, you're not going to go on the end of year trip or something like that." And then finally, the kid realizes, okay, that he's got to stop talking in class. He wants to turn himself around. He realizes it's gotten him into too much trouble, and he wants to turn himself around. He wants to be one of the good kids, not one of the bad kids talking all the time in the class, right? But still, I remember incidents like this where, as a teacher, that if I heard talking behind me, and I knew he was the big talker in the class, even though he made a commitment to turn himself around, I would still assume it was him or her. Right, because that's who I know is the big talker. And it took a little while for me to stop assuming that when I heard noise behind me that it was that kid talking, right? It takes a while. You have to continue a little bit more in the direction you were going before you're able to turn yourself around. And I think that's precisely what's happening here. Okay, the Israelites are about to hit rock bottom. They're in a pretty bad situation, right? God says, "That's it. It's time to turn this bus around, right? We're gonna hit the brakes and make a U-turn, right? It's time for me to fulfill my promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's time for me to get involved in the situation. Okay, we're gonna hit the brakes on this one, and we're gonna turn them around, and we get the Israelites free out of Egypt and back up to the land of Israel." Okay, but as soon as God hits the brakes, the rules of the world that He created are that the bus still has to continue for a little while longer in the direction that it was going. It can't stop on a dime, right? If it's a bus or a truck, especially, right? So that's what happens here. God gets involved, but the situation continues going down because that's the direction that the situation was heading in. And God's involvement at that time actually kind of exacerbates it because it's more input for Pharaoh, right, to continue more in the direction that he was going, right? So it's going to take a little while for the brakes to be established, or for the brakes to slow the bus down and be able to turn it around. And Moshe doesn't understand what's going on. The Israelites don't understand what's going on. The Shotrim, the capos, the Jewish capos don't understand what's going on, right? And they're worried. They're like, what? And so Moshe comes to God and says, what are you doing? You know, what the heck are you doing? You get involved and the situation gets worse, right? And God doesn't say, oh, God, you know, you don't understand. You're an idiot. You know, you don't understand, you know, this is, you know, or I made a mistake, or, you know, I'm going to do something else or whatever. No, God basically says exactly what I'm saying. He gives Moshe right here the law of the land. He says he gives Moshe the law. He explains to Moshe the laws of physics, right? He says, don't worry, it's going to turn around, right? And that's exactly what this verse 1 says. I'll translate it now more or less word for word. V'yomer Yahweh el Moshe, and Yahweh said to Moshe, Ata tireh asher eseh leFaro. Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. Ki biyad hazakah Yishalchem, because with a strong hand he shall send them away. In other words, Pharaoh shall send away the Israelites. Uyad hazakah yigarshem me'atzo, and with a strong hand he shall chase them out of his land. So basically, God is saying, relax. You know, you're going to see where this all leads. You think it's heading downhill. It's going to head downhill for a little while longer, but it's about to turn around. But this is just the way natural processes work. These are the laws of physics. These are the laws of mechanics. These are the laws of, shall we say, spiritual physics. Okay, so that's always been my explanation for that, and I think it's really fascinating, right? In a certain sense, and we see that, you know, God is very respectful of the laws that He created. Maybe those are the only laws He could have created. I don't know. That's already getting into philosophy, which I don't want to get into. He's very respectful of the processes that He put into place in his world. Even though He's God, he can't change the fact that if a bus is heading towards a brick wall, that when you slam on the brakes, it's not going to stop on a dime. Okay? But He is explaining to Moshe, don't worry. The bus is turning around real soon. And when it turns around, it's going to start picking up speed in the opposite direction more and more and more. That's why the plagues get more and more intense, right? They reach intensity. They reach a crescendo, right? I don't want to get disgusting here, but you know, it's you know, you can think of a sexual analogy, right? They reach a crescendo, and then the Israelites are ejected from Egypt at that crescendo. It really is very analogous to that, you know, to that aspect, that sexual aspect of our lives. I'll say no more than that, but you see it building up, and then it all kind of exploding, and it's accelerating in the other direction. Okay, I think I've already said too much. Okay, I'll shut up now. All right, so let's go on now. We are in Exodus chapter 6, verse 2. So now this is the beginning officially of our parsha. Does anyone have any comments or anyone have any questions so far?
Brother,
button. Yes, go ahead, Yerma.
I wanna point out something in Exodus chapter 1, verse 15.
Yes, please.
And the reason I want to point it out is because I've been asked about this in the past.
Mm-hmm.
How one of the commandments is not to lie, and the midwife lied, right?
Okay.
To Pharaoh.
Right.
So, my understanding why they did it is because they're saving a righteous person.
Right.
And that's why they were allowed to lie. But maybe I'm wrong. You know, that's what, you know, I believe why because they're not the only ones that I've encountered in the Torah. They've lied. You know, we have Rabbi, we have, what's her name? The one who saved the Israelites in the book of Joshua. Rahab.
Rachav.
Rahab. Yeah, she
Mhm.
lied also, but it
Right.
was also, I see she did it to save
Right.
Yahweh's people.
Right. I think again, it's something that we spoke about when we had our conversation this week. I think that there's really a lot to say about it, and there would be a lot of verses to bring up, and it would be like a whole study,
Right.
But basically, I think there's you have to apply a certain amount of common sense. Okay,
Mhm.
it's a good rule not to lie, but there are times where it's just you have to use your common sense and you have to lie, right? So the classic example is it's not a pleasant example, but the classic example I always used to hear is, let's say the Nazis, came to you and said, and said, are the do you have Jews hidden in your basement or something like that, right? I mean, if you want to save the Jews, at that point, you're not going to say, yes, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to lie. Yes, there's a family of Jews hiding in my basement. Here's the combination lock, and it's just a matter of common sense. I would say that you don't lie unless there's a good reason to do it, or unless there's a logical reason to do it. Maybe a corollary or a follow-up to that would be that if you don't lie to people who are honest to you, right? There's a famous phrase that God is straightforward with those who are straightforward, and he's like a twisty lane with those who are twisty. He's like a snake with those who are snakes towards him, right? I mean,
Right.
if someone is honest, then yes, obviously, I think we should mirror that back and be honest with them. But if someone is dishonest with us, or if someone is dangerous, or if someone is a criminal or a crook in any way, shape, or form, then I don't think that. Not only do I not think that it would be that it's a good idea at that point to tell the truth, I think it actually is explicitly a bad idea to be straightforward with people who are not straightforward. It basically, the way I look at it is, this is my own personal opinion, I kind of mirror people back. Not always, because I'm not a tit for tat type of guy, and most people shouldn't be. We should kind of take the high road. But in general, if I see someone's a snake with me, I have no problem being a snake back with them when I need to, because I'm just mirroring back what they are, So I think again, because you're coming from a let's say a background, shall we say, let's say in a Christian background, which was, I guess, was your Messianic background, which was your original background, even though you've now left it. Things I think are considered more black and white. You should never lie, and you should never you should always tell the truth, and it's kind of these absolutes. And I don't think that's the way
And
it works
brother,
in real life, and I don't think it's the way it works in the Torah, right? Everything
right.
has to be taken in context. You can't decontextualize. So that
Right.
would be my
And
answer.
that is the reason I'm asking, because I know that a lot of us who come either from Christianity or the Messianic roots,
Right.
we're taught not to lie. And when you
Right.
read something like this, the first thing that comes to your head is, okay, they're lying. So what's going
Right.
on here? But like I said, I've come to the understanding that
Right.
they lie to save a righteous person. They didn't lie just to lie.
Correct. They lied against a nation that was a bunch of idol worshippers and murderers and God knows what else. We saw all the sins of the Canaanites, and right. So we're not talking about nice people, right? I would say,
Right.
again, the law of the land for me is not necessarily don't lie, but it's to reflect back to people what they are to me. If someone is straightforward to me, then I will be 1,000% straightforward to them. If I see someone is trying to get something over on me, then I have no problem being a snake back with them. And so where we have a mitzvah where it says lo tichazavu, do not be deceitful, do not lie. Really what it's saying is, don't lie to an innocent person. Don't lie to a person who doesn't deserve it, right? Who has no reason for you to lie to them. Okay. All right, Yermit, let me go on. Okay. So so we are in verse 2. Okay. So now God is going to start turning that bus around. He's going to start getting involved, and things are going to start getting better for the Israelites, and consequently worse for the Egyptians. So we're in verse 2, and this is the beginning of our parsha, actually. So we have Vaydaber Elohim el Moshe Vayomer Elau Ani Yahweh. So God spoke to Moshe, and he said, "I am Yahweh." Okay, he had already given his name, right, in Exodus chapter 3, right? He had already told us that his name is Yahweh. We saw that last week, right? Let's go see it again because it's so important. Okay. In 3:15, right? God reveals his name as Yahweh, okay, and says Zeshmi le'olam wa zichri ledor dor. This is my name forever, and this is the way you shall remember me, the way you shall mention me from generation to generation, literally my mention or my remembrance. Okay, so God is in chapter 3 verse 15 has revealed his name to Moshe as Yahweh, right? Now we get some more information. So God reiterates here, Ani Yahweh, right? I am Yahweh. Okay, and so first of all, Moshe, God is now saying, okay, don't worry. First of all, I think is the implication here. Okay, I am Yahweh. Okay, you know who I am. I've told you who I am, and now things are going to start turning around. Yes, we had to let the bus go a little bit in the direction it was going before we're able to turn around. But don't you worry. I know what I'm doing. Okay, I created the laws of the universe in a very nice, logical way, and it's actually gonna serve us, because what it's doing while the bus is still going in towards the brick wall, it's actually gonna get Pharaoh into more trouble, because it's going to dig an even deeper hole for himself, which then I can avenge with even more signs and wonders, right? Okay, verse 3. Vaera el Avraham el Yitzhak wa el Yaakov be'el Shaddai u'shmi Yahweh lo nad'ati Elohim. Okay, I appeared to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov as El Shaddai. U'shmi Yahweh lo nad'ati Elohim. But my name Yahweh I did not make known to them. Is that true? What do you guys think? Well, if we look back, we could see many times that the word Yahweh is mentioned by the patriarchs. Okay, let's find some examples. For instance, Yahweh. Then I'm going to find an example. Let's go ahead a little bit. 1 second. Oh, it appears so many times. All right, let's move ahead a little bit. Avraham b'Shem. Here's a good one. Okay, Genesis 13:4. It says, okay, let me just get in context here. Oops. Okay, so Genesis 13:4. Avram kaved ma'od b'mekneh במקום המזבח אשר עשה שם בראשונה ויקרא שם אברהם בשם Yahweh. So Abraham built an altar, and it says, and v'yikra sham Avram b'shem Yahweh, and it says there that Abraham called out in the name of Yahweh, b'shem Yahweh, right? So how do we reconcile this? Yirma, I'm just going to mute you. You can always unmute yourself when and if you need to. Okay. So how do we reconcile this? It says right here, okay, that I appeared to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov as El Shaddai. Ushmi Yahweh lo nodati lehem, but my name Yahweh I did not make known to them. Right. So I don't know. There are a lot of possibilities. Okay, but my answer at this point in time has been that we have to take this at face value. Okay, we see first of all in let me just cancel this out. We see first of all in Exodus 3:15 that God reveals his name as Yahweh, right? And it seems for the first time ever, right? It seems that he's revealing that name for the first time. we see here that God is saying explicitly that he did not appear to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov as Yahweh, but he appeared as El Shaddai, and he did not make the name Yahweh known to them, right? So I have to take those statements seem like pretty direct, strong statements, right? The revelation of the actual name in Exodus chapter 3, the statement that that this name was not known to Abraham, to the forefathers in Exodus 6:2, and therefore my solution to this problem is that whenever we see things like V'yikra Shem Avraham, V'yikra Sham Avraham b'Shem Yahweh, that there Avraham called in the name of Yahweh, that it's not referring explicitly to calling out the name Yahweh, that he actually did not know the name Yahweh. Okay, that when it says, for instance, here he called out b'Shem Yahweh, that the name he knew at that point was El Shaddai. It says, yes, the name of God means calling out, to God by name, but the name that he knew at that point was El Shaddai. That's what I believe. Okay, if you read different interpretations or different solutions, they will say a lot of different things. But that's the conclusion that over the years that I've come to. Of course, the most common conclusion that you'll read is that this is a classic example of the of proof of the documentary hypothesis that the Torah was written by 4 different authors, right? We have the E, the J, the P, and the D, and that this was written by, probably the E author, the Elohist, and that over here, this would have been written by the Yahwist, and that over here, this would have been written by the Elohist, and that over here, this is written by the Yahwist. But I obviously don't believe in the documentary hypothesis. I don't believe in it, not even 0.0001%. I think it's completely false. I've actually heard some Orthodox or modern Orthodox Jewish types actually say that they have nothing per se against the documentary hypothesis, but I don't believe it in the least. But that would be a common answer that you would get, and I assume if we check, let's say Robert Alter, I assume that's what he's going to say. I don't know. I didn't look what he said, but I think that we can go back to the earlier times before God's name is revealed as Yahweh to in Exodus chapter 3, verse 15, and we can understand that every time that it's speaking about Yahweh or the name of Yahweh, that it doesn't literally mean that name is being used or that name was known. And I don't see any kind of major contradiction. Okay, because the name, even though the Israelites didn't know the name of God as Yahweh. I mean, the patriarchs didn't know the name of God as Yahweh. By the time the Torah was written down, okay, they already did know the name. So it could be used, when it says that, it says in Genesis chapter 2, when it starts using the name a lot, that, it's obvious that when the Torah was written, that name was already known. And the name is eternal. Even if Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob didn't know it, the name of God at that even before then was still Yahweh, whether it was known or not. Okay, so that I can go into this for another hour and a half, but that is kind of my explanation. Let's just look at Robert Alter, see what he has to say. So this is Genesis chapter 13, verse 4. Let's see here. I'm sorry, Exodus 13. No, what am I talking about? No, it's Exodus 6:6. That's what I meant to say. So let's bring this up again. Exodus 6:6. Let me bring it up in my second copy here. Okay. Okay, so actually Robert Alter doesn't relate to this at all. Okay. Are we in the right chapter here? This is 6. I'm the Lord. Wait 1 second. I'm sorry, it's verse 2. Yahweh. Something didn't seem right there. So verse 2. Okay, I am the Lord. Okay, let's just read what Robert Alter has to say. I have no idea what he's going to say. The formula, I am X, has been found in a variety of ancient Near Eastern documents, both royal proclamations and pronouncements attributed to sundry deities. The force of the words is something like, by the authority invested in me as X, I make the following solemn declaration. Right. The content of this particular declaration is a rehearsal of the binding covenant in which God entered with the patriarchs and an expression of his determination now to fulfill the covenantal. Oh, okay, fine, we'll read this, but actually it's the next verse. That is what we're talking about. Covenantal promise by freeing the Israelites from slavery and bringing them up to the land of Canaan. In terms of the narrative rhythm of the Exodus story, this grand proclamation by the deity is inserted after the frustration of Moses and Aaron's initial efforts, suspending the action while providing depth of historical background before the unleashing of the first of the plagues. Okay, so that's Robert Alter's explanation of Ani Yahweh. Okay, that's over here. So I agree with that. It's kind of like he's saying in the name of Yahweh, I will start doing things now, right? So verse 3. Oops, did I just close that by mistake? No, I didn't. I almost did. Verse 3 is El Shaddai, but my name Yahweh I was not known to them. So this is an interesting one. The designation El Shaddai, which is in fact used a total of 5 times in the patriarchic tales, is an archaic, evidently Canaanite combination of divine names. El was the high god of the Canaanite pantheon, though the Hebrew term is also a common noun meaning God. No satisfactory explanation for the meaning or origin of the name Shaddai has been made, but some scholars link it with a term for mountain. It's usually translated as mighty God or something like that, and others associate it with fertility. The usage of in my name is a little odd because there is no equivalent here for in Hebrew. Okay, William H.C. Prop. We're going to skip ahead a little bit here. Were the patriarchs in fact ignorant of the name Yahweh? There we go. It is true that Genesis has no special episode involving the revelation of the syllables and mystery of this divine name, as we have here in 3:13-16. Right? That's what we're saying. But there is also no indication that the name was withheld from the patriarchs. And the primeval history, meaning Genesis, reports that the invocation of this name goes back to the name of Enosh, son of Seth, Genesis 4:26. We'll take a look at that in a second. Some critics see this passage as striking evidence for the original autonomy of the priestly source, which does not share Jay's assumption that the name Yahweh was known to the patriarchs. So here we go. That's exactly what we're saying. That's now they're invoking he's mentioning the documentary hypothesis, right? Saying that this is clear proof that the Torah was written by more than one author. If you all know what the documentary hypothesis is. All the sources drawn together in the Exodus narrative assume that it was only on the threshold of God's intervention in history to liberate Israel that he revealed his unique name to the whole people. So Robert Alter is actually not as bad as I thought. First of all, he does say that there are source critics who see this as striking evidence, as clear evidence that the Torah is written by 4 different authors, right? Because we do see Yahweh mentioned many times in Genesis. But he doesn't, although he says that that's what source critics believe, he doesn't himself say that that's what he believes, which is a bit surprising for me. That's what I thought he was going to say, as a matter of fact, because I know he is into the source critical interpretation of the or understanding of the Torah. But what he does say is it is true that Genesis has no special episode involving the revelation of the syllables and the mystery of the divine name, as we have here in 3:13-16. That's what we mentioned, right? That we have an explicit revelation of the name in Exodus 3. And so for me, I've got to go by that. It's so clear. It's so explicit. There's no other way to understand it, right? And he also mentions there's no indication explicitly that the name was withheld from the patriarchs. He speaks of Genesis 4:26. So let's take a look for a second at Genesis 4:26 and see what we have here. Okay. Genesis 4:26. And actually, let me reopen that other tab. History. Genesis 13 as well. So, okay, we'll look at that. Genesis 13:4. Let's look at Genesis 4:6, was it? What was it again? Genesis 4:26. Okay. So this is speaking about the birth of Seth. Okay, I'll just start in verse 25. So this is Genesis chapter 4, verse 25. So Adam, after this is already after the death of Abel, Cain killing Abel, that Adam knew his wife, knew in the biblical sense. I mean, we are after all in the Bible, and gave birth and called his name, called the son's name Sheth, which is understood in English, translated in English as Seth. Ki shat li Elohim zera acher, because God has given to me, given to me zera acher, another seed, tachat hevel, in place of hevel, ki harago Cain, because Cain killed him, because basically God has given me another son in place of Hevel, Abel, who Cain killed. Okay, and here in verse 26, U'eshet gam hu yulad ben, and Seth also gave birth to a son, Vayikrat Shemo Enosh, and gave him and called him by the name Enosh. Azuchal likro b'shem Yahweh. Okay, and then it was begun. And then the name of God, or people began to call on the name of God. We can translate it that way. We have the same thing here. Likro b'shem Yahweh. Okay, people, or az hucha likro b'shem. The name of Yahweh was begun to be called upon. Okay, here we have in Genesis 13:6. Okay, that Avraham, when he builds the altar, Yikra Sham Avraham b'shem Yahweh. Right, it's exactly the same phrase. Yikra, he called there. Abraham called upon b'shem Yahweh, on the name of Yahweh. Here we have in Genesis 4:26. Then the name of Yahweh was begun to be called upon. Okay, Likro b'shem Hashem. Likro b'shem Hashem. Here we have Yikra Avraham b'shem Hashem, b'shem Yahweh, I should say, right? So it's that same phrase again, right? Calling on the name of Yahweh, right? So this is where the documentary hypothesists, the source critics, or the source critical school, would say, well, this is a clear indication. It says that Avraham was calling on the name of Yahweh, or on the name Yahweh. Here it says that people began to call on the name Yahweh, and that's it. Clear proof that the name Yahweh was already known as far back as Enosh, the grandson of Adam and Eve, and that people use that name, and that Abraham used that name, and many other times the name is mentioned. But I don't think that's at all what's going on here, even though it does say Yikra Sham Avram b'shem Yahweh, okay, that Abraham called upon the name of Yahweh, okay, and even though here it says that people began to call on the name of Yahweh, okay, that it doesn't state explicitly, okay, what that name they used was. In other words, we could see this as that people began to call Yahweh, or call out Yahweh by name, but the name that they knew at that point was El Shaddai, or El Elyon, or Elohim, or other things along those lines, right? So we could, let's say, translate this over here when it says that Abraham called out on the name of Yahweh. Okay, we could say it that Abraham called out to Yahweh by name. Okay, that's maybe the way I would translate it. That would be a good translation. Okay, Abraham called out to Yahweh by name. Okay, so yes, Yahweh is his eternal name. When the Torah is written down much later, then this name is already known because it's revealed in Exodus chapter 3, verses 13 through 16. But it doesn't say here that when Abraham is calling out, he's using the name Yahweh. Okay, it is just saying that he's calling out to Yahweh. That is who he's calling out to. That's his real name. But he's calling out to Yahweh by name. Okay, he's using a different name. We don't know, he doesn't know that name Yahweh. Okay, yes, his name, we know, the Torah knows his name is Yahweh, that's why it's written here, but Abraham didn't do it. It just says he's calling out to God by name. Okay, so I hope that kind of makes the point, and I hope it kind of makes sense. It makes sense to me, and I think it actually, surprisingly, like I said, Robert Alter, who is very friendly towards the documentary hypothesis, the source critical understanding of the Torah, actually also, he doesn't say it explicitly, but he kind of hints that he does not necessarily agree with the source critics either. In other words, what he seems to be saying, if you read between the lines here, is that he does not agree that this is a slam dunk for the fact that the Torah was written by 4 different authors, and therefore the sources being referred to here in Genesis 4, I think he mentioned the P source, I'm not sure. So therefore the P source already knew the name or was already using the name Yahweh, but the J source did not start using the name Yahweh until Exodus 3. That's what the documentary hypothesists would say, and Robert Alter, who's usually quite friendly towards them, and I think believes the underlying idea of the documentary hypothesis, is actually even saying that even though that's what they say, he doesn't 100% buy that. He thinks that's entirely possible, that something else is going on. And where does he hint at that? Okay. It is true that Genesis has no special episode involving the revelation of the syllables and mystery of the divine name, as we have here in 3:13 to 16, but there's also no indication that the name was withheld from the patriarchs, and the primeval history reports that the invocation of this name goes back to the time of Enosh, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So he's saying, yes, that there is some indication, but that he himself doesn't necessarily agree with the source critics, and that's why he's mentioning the source critics separately, is seeing this as a slam dunk for the idea that Yahweh is known by the different authors, and therefore basically proof that there were different authors of the Torah. If you don't know what the documentary hypothesis is, if this is a little bit too technical and complicated, don't worry about it, because we're going to move on now. But I definitely did want to point that out. Okay. So even Robert Alter, the bottom line is even Robert Alter, who's generally very friendly towards the documentary hypothesis that the Torah was written by, which states that the Torah was written by usually 4 different authors. Some add more, some take some away. So all kinds of different variations. Is not 100% giving in to their claim that this is a slam dunk. That the fact that Yahweh is mentioned by, let's say, Abraham in Genesis 13:6, right? That he called out B'Shem Yahweh. Robert Alter is saying that even though it says that, that's not even a slam dunk, that proving that there are 4 different authors for the Torah. Okay, let's move on. Hamivin Yavin. Whoever understood what I was trying to explain, that's great. Whoever didn't, it's really, honestly, not that critical to understanding what's going on in the parsha. Okay, let's move on. So that explains verse Exodus 6:3, which is usually a pretty tricky one. Okay, for the reasons mentioned. Okay, verse 4. So in Exodus chapter 6, verse 4, Viram hakimoti et berithi itam lathet lohem et eretz kinaan et eretz mi horehem asher garuba. And also, now he's referring back to the covenant that he cut with the patriarchs, with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he's going to give the land of their migorehem, their sojournings, right, their temporary stay, that he's going to give it to them, meaning to their descendants, right? So he's, again, just basically God here is, Yahweh is basically referencing back to the patriarchs. He's speaking about that they didn't know his name, that he did promise them the land of Israel. Okay, let's move on to verse 5. Ram ani sham'ati et na'kat b'nei Yisrael asher Misraim ma'avidim otam wa iskor et beriti. And And I have heard the cry of the children of Israel that Egypt is enslaving them or is oppressing them, and وَأَذْكُرْ et briti, and I have remembered my covenant. In other words, this is basically God reiterating the point that he's now getting involved, right? It is now time for him, after 400 years from, in my opinion, from Genesis 15, the Brit Ben Abitarim, that's when the clock starts. 400 years after Abraham was originally given the covenant of the pieces, where he was promised the land of Israel and promised many descendants, that now God is actually coming back to fulfill that promise 400 years later, and he is again reiterating this here. Okay, verse 6. L'chein emor livnei Yisrael ani Yahweh והוצאתי אתכם מתחת סבלות מצרים והצלתי אתכם מעבודתם וגאלתי אתכם בזרועה נטויה ובשפטים גדולים. And now, or therefore say to the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, and I shall take you out from under the sufferings, the burdens of Egypt, and I will save you from their oppression, from their enslavement of you. And I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, and with great signs. Right? So God is basically now, okay, so after this not so good start, right? Now God is reiterating the fact that now we're going to get down to business here. Now that bus is going to be turned around. Okay? ולקחתי אתכם לי לעם והייתי לכם לאלוהים וידעתם כי אני יהוה אלוהיכם מוציא אתכם מתחת סבלות מצרים. And I will take you to me as a people, and I will be for you as a God, and you shall know that I, כי אני יהוה אלוהיכם, that I am Yahweh, your God, המוציא אתכם מתחת סבלות מצרים, who takes you out of the sufferings or the oppressions, the burdens of Egypt. Verse 8. והבאתי אתכם אל הארץ אשר נשאתי את ידי לתת אותה לאברהם, ליצחק, ליעקב, ונתתי אותה לכם מורשה, אני יהוה. And I shall bring you, הבאתי אתכם אל, and I shall bring you to the land which I raised my hand. In other words, that's an analogy for swearing, right? לתת אותה לאברהם, ליצחק, ליעקב, to give it to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. נתתי אותה לכם, and I shall give it to you as a morasha, as an inheritance or as a heritage. Ani Yahweh. And then again he repeats Ani Yahweh, right? So we've seen this now a number of times. Ani Yahweh, Ani Yahweh. God is saying he's doing this in his name, Yahweh. He's basically swearing by himself, right? As Robert Alter so correctly pointed out. Let's get that nice phraseology that he used. That was here. Okay. I am X, let's just read this again, has been found in a variety of ancient Near Eastern documents, both royal proclamations and pronouncements attributed to sundry deities. The force of the words is something like, by the authority invested in me as X, I make the following solemn declaration. Basically, Yahweh is invoking his own name to say what he's about to do. So when he does that, you know, it's we're getting down to business here, right? Okay. Any questions, any comments before we move on? Yermai, got anything for us? No? Okay. All righty then. So we'll move on. I'm going to try to move a little bit faster at this point, because otherwise we're just going to get bogged down. We've already been studying for about an hour and 15 minutes, and I would like to try to get through the entire parsha. Okay. Verse 9. וידבר משה כן אל בני ישראל ולא שמעו אל משה מקוצר רוח מעבודה קשה. And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, and they did not listen to Moshe mikotzer ruach, because of, well, literally shortness of breath, ume'avodah kasha, and hard work and hard labor. Kotzer ruach, you could basically say they were just worn out, you know, burnt out, or what would be a good translation? Literally, it's shortness of breath or shortness of spirit, you could say. Literally, if you want to take it the most literal translation, would be mikotze ruach, shortness of wind, right? Which implies shortness of breath. But ruach often means spirit, right? Hashem is the Adon Kol HaRuchot. God is the master over all spirits. Okay, so basically means that they were just well, you get the idea, right? I think kotze ruach, shortness of spirit, it explains it pretty well. Let's see how a couple of translators deal with that one. Verse 9. So Robert Alter gives it to, okay, he takes it quite literally, shortness of breath. That's an interesting. Let's go with Everett Fox, Shokin Bible. Excellent translation. Try to find where it is. Let's try 85. Not bad. 75. 65. Okay, pretty close. So we're in Exodus 6:9. So Robert Alter gives it shortness of spirit. Okay, so I think that pretty much sums up what we were saying. Okay, NIV, just for kicks and giggles. NIV gives it as, close these out now, by the way. Oops. Six, 9, discouragement. Well, we get the idea, right? Okay, let's move on. And now Moses and Aaron are sent to Pharaoh again, and this time the situation is going to start getting a little bit better, right? Again, we gave the analogy of that bus is going to take a while, right? So now we could say maybe the bus is now stopped and is going to start turning around, but it's going to have to accelerate back in the other direction before it really picks up speed. So the first couple of plays are going to be kind of a, not kind of a, we wouldn't say a disaster, but, not so convincing, as we shall see, and as we probably already know. Verse 10, why daber Yahweh el Moshe lemor? Yahweh spoke to Moshe and said, we're saying, Bo daber el Paro melech Misraim, וישלח את בני ישראל מארצו. Go speak to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, that he should send the children of Israel from his land. He should let my people go. He let the people of Israel go. Verse 12. וידבר משה לפני יהוה לאמור הן בני ישראל לא שמעו אלי ואין ישמעני פרעה ואני ערל שפתיים. And Moshe spoke before Yahweh and said, listen, the children of Israel are not going to listen to me. Okay. I'm sorry. They did not listen to me. And how, I'm sorry. Let's start that one again. Moshe says back to God, the children of Israel doesn't listen to me. How do you expect that Pharaoh is going to listen to me, right? Even the children of Israel are now basically upset with Moshe because he made this situation what's worse. And now you expect that Pharaoh is going to listen to me? That's basically what Moshe says. So Moshe, again, even though he's been, I think this is now the 5th time that Moshe is basically saying, listen, I can't do this job. I don't want this job. I want nothing to do with this. Okay. They're not going to listen to me anyway, or Pharaoh's not going to listen to me, right? I really just send me home. I want to go back to my sheep, right? Is the implication here, right? I am literally uncircumcised of lips, or my lips are uncircumcised. Okay, so we'll get to that phrase in a second, but basically Moshe wants out, right? Moshe definitely wants out, and he's still demurring. He's still trying to say that he's not the right person for the job, even though God has repeatedly got even angry at him when he tried to get out of it the first couple of times, right? So I am uncircumcised lips. My lips are uncircumcised, right? So we have this phrase, okay, referring to a number of different things, right? We've spoken about an uncircumcised heart, right? We can find that. One second. Let's find a good one. Here we have uncircumcised ears. And Jeremiah 9:26 is probably the most famous one. Okay, let's go to that for a second. So Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 26. Okay, I won't read through the whole thing, but we can start here. Verse 25 says, Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 25. Hine yamim ba'im ne'um Yahweh. Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, upaqaddi al kol mul be'orla. And I will recompense al kol mul be'orla. I will recompense all of those who are circumcised with uncircumcised ones. Okay? And what does that mean? Well, let's see in verse 26. Al Misraim, wa al Yehuda, wa al Edom, wa al Bnei Ammon, wa al Moab, wa al kol susei pe'ah hayushvim b'midbar, ki kol hagoyim arelim. So upon Egypt, and upon Judah, and upon Edom, and upon the children of Ammon, and upon Moab, and upon kol kitzutzei pe'ah, all of those who basically live in the outskirts or live in the far corners of the earth, one could say, Yoshvim b'midbar, who dwell in the desert, ki kol hagoyim arelim, because all of the nations are arelim, are uncircumcised, and there it's referring literally to uncircumcised, meaning in their private parts. V'chol beit Yisrael arle lev, and all of the children of Israel, all of the house of Israel, are uncircumcised in the heart. Okay. So basically, this idea of being uncircumcised in the heart, we saw uncircumcised in the ears, right? It basically means that the, shall we say, what would be a good way of explaining it, right? That if the heart is uncircumcised, then it's surrounded by some kind of boundary, some kind of border, like a foreskin that's preventing it from being reached. If the ears are uncircumcised, if they're arelim, then it's surrounded by a skin that's preventing them from hearing, right? So this idea of being arel, and just like the physical private part that gets circumcised, right? If it's uncircumcised, then it's surrounded by this foreskin, which prevents it from, shall we say, completing the brit, or maybe even revealing its true form as when it was intended by God, shall we say, right? There's some kind of extra layer on it, some kind of extra skin or layer that's preventing it from being the way it's supposed to be, from functioning the way that it's supposed to function. That's the idea of this of arel, and that's exactly what Moshe says here when he says ani aral sfatayim, I'm circumcised in the lips, right? Meaning, it's the analogy is it's as if he has like some kind of, well, let's not get gross, we won't say foreskin, but some kind of, let's say, membrane that's covering his lips, which makes him not be able to speak clearly. Is this meant literally? Absolutely not. Okay, I'll tell you in a second what the rabbis say, or at least what the Midrash says, which we all, I think every Jew, I certainly did learn when we were in Hebrew school growing up. But it's an analogy. It's not. It's a phrase. It's an allegory. Okay, when we see uncircumcised ears, when we see uncircumcised lips, as we see in this case, when we see uncircumcised, what do you want?
I just got back.
Okay, fine. Let me do the study. Excuse me for 1 second. Okay, so sorry about that. So back to where we were, right? So this idea of uncircumcised, right? So in the literal sense, it means the foreskin. There's a membrane that's covering the the private area of the male, right? And so it prevents the private area of the male from reaching its true form, or maybe its true function, whatever. And so that's the analogy that's being used. So when it's arel oznaim, as we saw in, was it Ezekiel, I think, right? Uncircumcised of the ears, it means something's covering the ears, right? Some membrane is covering the ears cannot hear. Uncircumcised of heart, it means some membrane is covering the heart cannot function. And again, the heart doesn't mean literally the pumping of the blood, but it means that the Israelites are not able to, they have a stubborn heart, right? They're circumcised of the uncircumcised of the heart. And the same thing here when excuse me, when Moshe says he's uncircumcised of the lips, he's basically saying he doesn't speak well, right? It's not meant literally. It means he doesn't feel that he's an eloquent spokesman for God. So he's still trying to demur. He's still trying to get out of it. He's still trying to do anything he can to basically say, I really, really, really don't want this job. And honestly, yes, God gets mad at him, but it's one of the most, shall we say, endearing qualities of Moshe, right? Because he's basically being put in charge of the entire people of Israel, and he wants nothing to do with it, right? We know it's later said that Moshe was the most humble among men, right? He was an extremely humble man, right? So we see this here, right? Even though, right? I mean, could you think of I don't know what would be a scummy politician, Joe Biden, right? If someone said to Joe Biden, we would like you to be, I don't know, president for another 4 years. He says, no, I can't, it's above me. I don't feel I'm up to the job. The United States is too large and too great a nation. I can't do it. Please find somebody else, right? You would never say that. That's for darn sure, right? The irony is that he is completely incompetent in the job and has no idea what he's doing and is incapable of doing the job, right? But Moshe, who is very capable of doing the job, wants nothing to do with it. An idiot, a complete, barely, conscious moron like Joe Biden, is incapable of doing the job, and not only does he want it, but believes he's entitled to it, right? So it's so beautiful to see such a humble man who is basically being given the, shall we say, the presidency, quote unquote, over the nation of Israel, and has tried now. I think this is the 6th time or the 5th time that Moshe has basically demurred and say, I just can't do this. This is, I just want to go back to being a shepherd. This is above me, right? And that is a sign that when Moshe does take the reins of Israel, right, he's doing it for the right reasons. He's doing it from the heart. So much so that on a number of occasions he stands up and he goes to bat for Israel when God threatens to destroy Israel. And so Moshe is a true leader, what a leader is meant to be. Someone who didn't want the job, but when he was forced into it, really did it from his heart. But at any rate, arel sfatayim, uncircumcised in the lips. All right. Can we get any commentary? We'll do a little Robert Alter. Maybe we'll look at a little bit of Ibn Ezra. So that's verse 12. And Moses spoke before the Lord. The preposition before instead of to is sometimes used in addressing the superior. Okay, fair enough. I am uncircumcised of lips. The phrase is an approximate parallel, the documentary critics would say, in P's vocabularies against J's. Okay, so of the heavy mouth and heavy tongue we encountered in chapter 4, right, which we saw in last week's Parsha. It is a mistake, however, to represent this upward displacement of a genital image simply as impeditive speech, because the metaphor of lack of circumcision suggests not merely incapacity of speech, but a kind of ritual lack of fitness for the sacred task, like Isaiah's impure lips in his dedication scene, Isaiah 6. Okay, that's an interesting idea. The idiom is clearly intended to resonate with the bridegroom of blood story, in which Moshe is not permitted to launch on his mission until an act of circumcision is performed, maybe. Syntactically, the last clause of the verse dangles ambiguously. Moshe's thought was already complete in the a fortiori, whatever the heck that means. He always speaks in kind of flowery language. Relation between the first and second clauses. If the Israelites won't listen to me, how much more so Pharaoh? Second. Okay, got it. And now Moses offers a kind of reinforcing afterthought. In any way, I am uncircumcised of lips. Right. So that's okay. So let's break this down a little bit of what he's saying. So first of all, we saw a similar phrase in Exodus chapter 4. Moshe said, I am heavy-mouthed and heavy-tongued, right? So this is, of course, fodder for cannon fodder for the not cannon fodder. This is food for the documentary critics, those who believe in the documentary hypothesis, because they're going to say that where it says heavy mouth and heavy tongue, that was P's. That was the P author, and here where it says uncircumcised of lips, that's the J author. So again, he's not giving into that. He's kind of rejecting that. And then he goes on to say something which I think is kind of interesting. He's saying that it just doesn't, that uncircumcised of lips doesn't just mean, not able to talk well, right? Impeded of speech. But he's saying it implies some kind of ritual lack of fitness for a sacred task. and then he quotes Isaiah's impure lips, okay, in Isaiah 6, which we could look into, but maybe we won't because I want to keep on moving here. Basically, he's saying that the use of the word arel, uncircumcised, basically Moshe is saying to God, I'm not pure enough for this task. I'm in a sense ritually impure. I cannot approach this holy task in a ritually impure state. I actually don't agree with Robert Alter on this one, but it is an interesting idea. I think that arel just again implies kind of like membrane that blocks or that impedes the organ, whether it's the ear, the heart, the lips, or the private part from operating correctly. Okay. And then he goes on to say that this idiom is clearly intended to resonate with the bridegroom of blood story. We remember that. That's in Exodus, I believe, chapter 2, or maybe it was 3. When Moses is 3. When Moses is in the desert, right after he sees the burning bush, and then he goes back and goes to Egypt with his wife and son, and then he stops at an inn. And then there's a strange interaction that it says that God wanted to kill Moses, and then his wife Tzipporah circumcises their son and throws the foreskin on the floor, and says, "You are bridegroom of blood to me." Very interesting and kind of enigmatic kind of passage. But then he's saying that Robert Alter is saying it's referring back to that. And then finally, the last thing that Robert Alter is saying, which I think is a fair enough point, is he's saying that Moshe already gave a reason here why he can't go to Pharaoh, and his reason was that where was it? Oops. If the children of Israel didn't listen to me, then Pharaoh is not going to listen to me. He's using a kal v'chomer, right? If you know what that is, if you have rabbinical background, okay. If you don't, I'm not going to get into it, but it's okay. So he's already saying, I can't, if the children of Israel didn't listen to me, then for sure Pharaoh's not going to listen to me, right? So that's already enough. That's already his reason why he doesn't want to go. But then he adds this extra reason, and also I'm uncircumcised in my lips. I'm of uncircumcised lips, right? So basically, what Robert Alter is saying here is that he'd already established the fact that he shouldn't go, or that Pharaoh, there's no reason for go because Pharaoh's not going to listen. So why does he offer this anyway, right? It's ambiguous, right? The last clause dangles ambiguously is how Robert Alter puts it. But basically, what Moshe's doing is he's really trying to say that he really still wants no part of this mission. You've picked the wrong guy, God. He's still at it. Right, it's going to take a while for Moses to feel comfortable in his skin with this new mission that he never expected, never asked for, and has no idea why he got it, and his first couple of days or weeks or months on the job is still getting used to it. Okay, we're going to move ahead a little bit now. Now we go into genealogy. So we're in verse 14, Exodus 6:14. Ere Rashi Beth Avotam Bnei Reuven Bechor Yisrael Hanoch Falu Hesron Harmi Ele Mishpachot Reuven. Verse 15. Uvnei Shimon Imoel Yamin Ohad Yachin Sohar Shaul Ben Hakinanit Ele Mishpachot Shimon. Okay, so verse 15, the children of Reuven. 14, the children of Reuven. Verse 15, the children of Shimon. Wa'ele Shemot b'nei Lewi, nitoladatam, Gershon, uKehat, uMerari, uShnei Hayei Lewi, Sheva, uSheloshim, uMe'at Shana. And these are the names of the children of Levi. And then we have the Gershonite, or Gershon, Kahat, Merari. And then it says that Levi himself, who was one of the sons of Yaakov, right? Joseph's contemporary, Joseph's brother, lived for Sheva Ushloshim Shana, 137 years, which I believe is the same number that, I can't remember now, 47. Yaakov was 147. I don't know, maybe not. Okay, I can't remember. I thought there was another 137 somewhere. Okay, so we have the children of Reuven, we have the children of Shimon, we have the children of Levi, and then we go into the children of the children of Levi. So, and this whole paragraph here is only designed to give the genealogy of Moshe, right? That's where it's going to end, right? That's where this is heading, okay? And we don't see any of the other children. We have the children of Reuven in verse 14. We have the children of Shimon in verse 15. The children of Levi in 16, and then it goes right on to the grandchildren of Levi and descendants all the way down to Moshe. So why doesn't it mention the other children? Why does it mention Reuven and Shimon? And why does it not mention the other children? Anyone have any ideas? You could just type in the answer, or you want to come on and say, you can. So we have the children of Reuven, we have the children of Shimon, we have the children of Levi, and then it stops there, and we dig down. We drill down into the Levi family tree. Why doesn't it mention any of the other children? How about the fourth child, Yehuda, and the fifth and the sixth, onto the 12th? Anybody? And why, if we're only interested in the descendants of Levi, meaning Moshe, we're only interested in Moshe's genealogy, why does it mention Reuven and Shimon at all? Okay, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay, well, the answer is very clearly that everything is hierarchy and status in the nation of Israel. What this paragraph really wants to do is speak about the genealogy of Moshe, who's from the line of Levi, right? But you cannot mention Levi without first mentioning without first mentioning Reuven and Shimon, because Reuven and Shimon were born before Levi. Levi was the third child of Leah. Reuven was the first child, I should say, Yaakov and Leah. Reuven was Yaakov's first child. Shimon was Yaakov's second child. Levi was Yaakov's third child. Okay, so the Torah will not, out of respect for the order, even though Yaakov basically threw Reuven, Shimon, and Levi off their perch as first, second, and third born. We saw that at the end of the book of Genesis. Nonetheless, Levi will not be mentioned unless first Reuven and Shimon are mentioned, because it has to go in order, right? Remember, we saw that when the brothers were sat at the table with Yosef, they sat from oldest to youngest. When the amtachot, when the sacks of the brothers were searched, looking for the missing magic goblet of Yosef, they were searched from the oldest to youngest, and it was in Benjamin's. He was the last one, and that was the whole kind of point of the story. But we see that the Torah, or by extension, ancient Israelites, or even by further extension in the ancient Near East, there was a great respect for order and hierarchy. You don't mention the third born without first mentioning the first and the second born. And we see, again, just as a general note, throughout the Torah and throughout the entire Tanakh, everyone knows their place. They know their status. They know where they fall in the hierarchy. They know who their ancestors are through the fatherly line, not the motherly line. The motherly line is rarely mentioned. And they know their order, their order within the, I hate to use the word pecking order, but their order within the hierarchy, right? Even among the children, we mentioned that sad but true. I won't say sad, but the truth of the matter is that there were those who had a higher status among the children, and those who had a lower status among the children. Yosef really having the highest status. You could say Binyamin maybe number 2, although he was the baby. I would place Yehuda as number 2, and then the sons of then maybe at that point Binyamin, because he was the second son of Rachel. Well, he was still the baby. Any rate, then you have the sons of Leah, and then you have the sons of the concubines. Okay, they are of a lower hierarchy. There's no two ways about it. You can see it in many different ways. You can see by the lengths of the blessings that they're given in the end of Genesis. You could see which we'll get to in a couple of weeks. You could see the way that the tribes are arranged around the tabernacle in the desert, whereby the sons of the concubines are given kind of secondary positions in each side. So it's clear that there's a hierarchy. Everyone knows their place. Everyone knows where they stand, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's a good thing. It's contrast it with what's going on in the United States in this day and age, where you have this this obsession with equity, where nobody knows where they stand, and everyone is meant to be completely equal, and there's no difference between anybody. And look at all the destruction that it's created in the United States. In the Torah, everybody knows their place, and whether you're a maidservant or whether you're the head of the nation, you still have a master above you, and that's Yahweh. So, and that's the way an army has to run, with people knowing their ranks and their places. A corporation has to run with people knowing their ranks and their places, and so any society, any nation has to run with people knowing their ranks and their places. And that means some people are going to have a higher rank, and some people are going to have a lower rank. So be it. That's just the way it is. But the point here is that Levi is not mentioned without first mentioning Reuven, the firstborn of Leah or of Yaakov, and Shimon, the secondborn of Yaakov. Okay, and then we go on. I'll just read ahead here. So we have the sons of Levi, Gershon, Kahat, and Merari. Each of those are going to be given special roles within the job of the Levitical service, right, to God, or to the tabernacle, shall we say, right? We'll talk about that later. Verse 17, Bnei Gershon, Livni, Shimei, Lemishpachotam. Verse 18, Uvnei Kahat, Amram, Izhar, and Amram is Moshe's father, right? So Moshe is a Kahati. Moshe and Aharon are Kahatis. They're from the Kahat tribe, clan. Yitzhar, Hebron, Uziel, Ushne Haye Kahat, Shalosh Shloshim Ma'at Shana. Okay, so Kahat lived for 133 years. Verse 19. Uvnei Mirari, Mahni, Umushi, Ene Mishpachot Halewi, Litoladatam. That's the descendants of the Maraites, the Merari clan. Wikach Amram et Yocheved do dato lo leisha watele lo et Aharon wa et Moshe ushne haye Amram sheva ushloshim u'ma'at shana. Okay, so here now we get down to business. So we saw that Levi gave birth to 3 sons. One of them was Kahat. Okay, Kahat gave birth to Amram. Okay. Amram married Yocheved. It says his aunt, but we won't even get into that right now. And gave birth to Aaron and Moshe. Okay, so Aaron and Moshe's father is Amram. Their mother is Yocheved. Their grandfather is Kahat, one of the clans that are mentioned later on with the tabernacle. And their great grandfather is Levi, and their great great grandfather is Yaakov, and their great I lost track of how many greats are up to, etc. Okay, so we're getting the genealogy of Moshe and Aaron. Okay, right, and what Moshe Shnei Chaye Amram lived for 137 years old to 137 years. We just saw that that's exactly the same number of years that Kahat lived for. So Amram and Kahat both lived for 137 years. And Levi lived for 107. Oh, I'm sorry. Also 137. So that's very strange and suspicious, if I may be honest. Okay. So Levi lived for 137 years. His son Kahat lived for 137 years. I'm sorry, no, Kat lived for 133. Kat lived for 133 years, and then Amram lived for 137 years. Okay. So where were we? Verse 21. Uvnei Yishar Korah wa Neref. I'm sorry, Nefer wa Zichri. Verse 22. Uvnei Uziel Mishael wa El Safan wa Sitri. Verse 23. Uyikach Aharon et Eli Sheva bat Aminadav Hod Nahshon lo Isha Wateled lo et Nadav wa et Avihu wa et Elazar wa et Itamar. Okay, so Aaron takes Elisheva, the son of Aminadav. So Aminadav. Is the okay? We'll get to all of this when the time comes. I don't want to get bogged down here, okay? But Nachshon, we know, shows up later on, okay? Lo Isha v'teled et Nadav wa et Avihu wa et Elazar wa et Itamar, and so Aaron and and Elisheva give birth to 4 sons, 2 of whom will die. Right, Nadav and Avihu are going to die when they bring a foreign fire on the altar, and that's going to leave Elazar and Itamar. So essentially, Elazar is going to take over from Aharon because he's the third born. The first 2 die. Uvnei Korach Asir wa Elkanah wa El wa Aviyas El Mishpachot HaKorchi. Verse 25. Wa El Azar ben Aharon Lakach lo Putiel lo Isha wa Teledo et Pinchas Era Rashe Avot Haliwiim. So Pinchas we're going to see later on, right? So we're getting all the genealogy here. Okay, I have a lot more to say about it, but we're just going to leave it at that because I want to move on. It's starting to get a bit late. Okay, so then this is all the genealogy, and now we get back to the main story, and the connecting phrase is right here. Okay, who Aaron ומשה אשר אמר יחווה להם הוציאו את בני ישראל מארץ מצרים על סיבותם. So this is the very same Aaron and Moshe who Yahweh said to them, take out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt by their hosts or upon their hosts in their multitudes or in their ranks. Tziva'otam implies, again, kind of a hierarchy, right? So it's usually translated as by hosts, right? Which implies that the nation of Israel is not just going out in a big blob of people. It's going out in an orderly fashion. At least when it goes out into the desert, it'll be in an orderly fashion. And we know that that's the case. We know that each of the tribes had different places to camp around the tabernacle, and there was certain protocol for moving, for stopping, right? So that would imply this tziva'otam, their armies or their hosts. Okay, verse 27. הם המדברים אל פרעה מלך מצרים להוציא את בני ישראל ממצרים הוא משה ואהרון. And then it says these are the same ones that spoke to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, telling them to let the children of Israel go from Egypt. This Moshe and Aaron, or this is Moshe and Aaron. Again, so it's again establishing, right? This is kind of the connecting piece back from the genealogy. We've now established the genealogy, and now it's kind of like this formal statement, or this, I guess, it's a glorifying statement of Moshe and Aaron, pointing out who they are, and now we're going to find out what they're going to do. Now we get back to the story, right? Okay. Just give me one second here. Okay, I think I'm going to take a break for 5 minutes. I just want to stretch my legs So let me put some music on, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Does anyone have any questions or any comments so far? Anybody? No? If not, I'm going to put music on for a couple minutes. I have to get the charger anyway, so it's a good time to do it. And let's see. What can we put on? Okay, we'll go with this.
מלאכי השרת, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שלום עליכם מלאכי השרת, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. בואכם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. בואכם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. בואכם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ברכוני לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ברכוני לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ברכוני לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. צאתכם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. צאתכם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. צאתכם לשלום מלאכי השלום, עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. אשת חיל נמצא ורחוק מפנינים ממך, פתח בלב עלה ושלל לא יחסר. מלאתו טוב ולא רע כל ימי חייה, תרשע מרופשתי ותעש בחפץ כבדה. הייתה כאוניו סוחר, ממרחק תביא לך, ותקום בעוד לילה, ותיתן טרף לביתה וחוף מנהרותיה, זמם השדה ותיקחהו, מפרי כפיה נטע כרם, הגרה בעוז מותניה, ותאמץ זרועיה. כמה כיתות שכר לא יכבה בלילה נר, ידיה שילך ותישוב וכפיה תמוך הלב. כפה פרסה לעני וידיה שילך ללוי, מחזירה לבית המשענת ככל בית הלבוש תמיד. מרבדים עשתה לה שש וארגמן לבושה, נודע בשערים בעלה בשבטו עם זקני ארץ, סדין עשתה ותמכור וחדור נתנה לכנעני, עוז והדר לבושה ותשחק ליום אחרון. פיה פתחה בחוכמה ותורה חסד על לשונה, סופיה הליכות ביתה ולחם עצלות לא תאכל. קמו בניה וישרוה בעלה ויהל לרבות בנות עשו חיל והטלית על כולנה שקר אחר מהבל היופי, אישה יראת השם התפללתנו מפרי ידיה והללוה בשערים מעשיה. מנוחה ושמחה אוהלה יהודים, יום שבתון יום אחמדים, שומרה וזוכרה המה מעידים, כי לשישה כל ברואים ועומדים. שמי שמיים ארץ וימים, כל צבא מרום גויים ורמים, וחייכני כי ביה השם צור עולמים הוא אשר דיבר לעם סגולתו שמור לקדשו מבואו ועד צאתו שבת קודש יום חנדתו כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו שמי שמיים ארץ ימים כל צבא מרום גויים ורמים תנים באדם וחייכני כי ביה השם צור עולמים במצוות שבת אל יחליצה
Okay, get back to study. All right, stop the music. Okay, so here we are. I've got the computer plugged in, so we're good to go with that. We are still in Exodus 6. We need to get up to Exodus 9, which means we still have a lot of work to do. And we have about another hour max. After that, I'm going to have to stop. So we better get down to business. So let me share the screen again. Window, Torah. Okay. So where were we? All right. So we're back to our story. Okay. And we are in Exodus chapter 6, verse 28. ויהי ביום דיבר יהוה אל משה בארץ מצרים. And so it was on this day, I guess you could translate it as, that Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the land of Mitzrayim. So in other words, now we're starting the real part of the story. You could think of the previous part as a prelude. Just curious to see how he translates that one. Right, okay. So now we're getting down to real business, right? So the previous was a prelude, right? Moshe and Aaron had come to Pharaoh and they said, let my people go. And Pharaoh basically told them where they can go. And now we're getting really down to where now basically this is the beginning of the Exodus story, right? Now things are going to turn around. To use the analogy we used before, the bus is now turning around and it's going to start accelerating in the other direction in favor of the Israelites. Verse 29, וידבר יהוה אל משה לאמור אני יהוה דבר אל פרעה. Yeah, you better put it back in the sun because she's driving me crazy. Okay? Go grab her. דבר אל פרעה מלך מצרים את כל אשר אני דובר אליך. So Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying ani Yahweh. Here we see the phrase again, ani Yahweh. You'll see this a lot. Okay? Speak to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Et kol ani dover elecha, and everything that I say to you. So God is going to speak to Moshe, and then Moshe is going to speak to Aaron, right? And Aaron's going to be the one who's actually going to relay the message. We saw that earlier in the book of Exodus. ויאמר משה לפני יהוה הן אני ארד שפתיים ואיך ישמע אלי פרעה. So then Moshe again says, I am uncircumcised of lips, and how will Pharaoh listen to me? He still doesn't want the job. Okay. Chapter 7, verse 1. ויאמר יהוה אל משה ראה נתתיך אלוהים לפרעה ואהרון אחיך יהיה נביאך. Okay? And so God says to Moshe, behold, or see, I've given you, I've made you as a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron, your brother, shall be your prophet, right? So we spoke about this last week, right? God basically, Moshe was supposed to go alone originally, but he refused a number of times, and then God said, "Okay, well, you have your brother Aaron, so I'll put the words in. I'll tell you what to say, and you'll put the words in his mouth, and then he'll say it, right?" So it's reiterating this too. But really, what it does, even though it was kind of a punishment for Moshe, is it makes Moshe look like a god, right? Moshe won't even speak directly to Pharaoh anymore. Moshe is just going to Moshe is going to be the one that looks like he's almost godlike, right? He's going to be on a higher status, and Aaron is going to basically be taking Moshe's words and telling them to Pharaoh, right? So God is really raising Moshe up in the eyes of Pharaoh, making him. Hello, can you guys hear me? Sorry about that. There was a little bit of that. We had a little glitch here. Can I get a sound check? Can you guys hear me okay? Yirma, can you hear me? You hear me? Okay, good. All right, then. Let me try this again.
I can hear you.
Okay, so let me share the screen again. Okay. So, so we were in Exodus 7:2. Verse 2, אתה תדבר את כל אשר אצווך, ואהרון אחיך ידבר אל פרעה, ושלח את בני ישראל מארצו. You shall say all that I command you, and Aaron your brother will speak to Pharaoh, and he will send the children of Israel from his land. He will let the children of Israel go out of his land. Verse 3, ואני אקשה את לב פרעה, והרביתי et otatai wa et muftai be'eretz Mitzrayim, and I will harden the heart of Pharaoh, et otatai, and I will increase increase in number my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. So God is going to harden the heart of Pharaoh. That's a huge discussion. Okay. In a certain sense, it's similar to the idea of a uncircumcised heart, right? A little bit different, but the same idea that the heart is not going to be, Pharaoh's heart is not going to be able to function, and it doesn't mean his literal physical heart, but the heart was a place of counsel, or of good counsel, right? So he's not going to be able to make wise decisions. Okay, his heart is going to be hardened. Okay. ולא ישמע אליכם פרעה ונתתי את ידי במצרים והוצאתי את צבאותיי את עמי בני ישראל מארץ מצרים בשפטים גדולים. And so Pharaoh, when his heart is hardened, will not listen to you, and put my hand against. I will place my hand upon Egypt, meaning I'm going to destroy it basically. And I will take out my armies, my hosts, meaning the children of Israel. Et ami b'nei Israel, my people, the children of Israel, me'eretz Mitzrayim, from the land of Israel, b'shvatim dolim, with great judgments. Verse 5. ויעדו מצרים כי אני יהוה בנתתי את ידי על מצרים והוצאתי את בני ישראל מתוכם. And Egypt shall know that I am Yahweh. Here we go again with this phrase, I am Yahweh, right? They're going to know that I am Yahweh. They're going to know who this God Yahweh is when I stretch out my hand on Egypt and I take the children of Israel out of Egypt from them, or out from among them. Verse 6. And Moshe and Aaron did as Yahweh commanded them, so they did. Right? In other words, they did exactly what Yahweh commanded. Moshe ben 80 shana וأהרון ben 83 shana בדברם אל פרעה. And Moshe was 80 years old, and Aaron was 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. So remember, we mentioned this earlier, right? Moshe was 80 years old. Maybe I'll even add this to my list. Moshe was 80 years old when he spoke to Pharaoh. This means that the Israelites had been enslaved for at least 80 years, because when Moshe was born, it was during the time when the Israelites were already being enslaved, right? That was one of the, that's why Moshe was put in a basket, right? Because it was commanded at that point that all of the male Israelites' babies be thrown into the river, right? So this just shows that the Israelites had been enslaved already for 80 years at least when God became involved with the situation. Okay, maybe I should even add this to my numbers sheet. Hold on a second. One second. Do it this way. So this is Exodus 7:7. Number is 80. Oh, wait a second. I had two numbers. Oh, Yaakov and Yosef ages. No, I want to put this. Hold on a second. Let's put it here. Make this Yaakov and Yosef and other ages. Okay. So we're going to say 80. This is Exodus 7:7. This is Moshe's age when he speaks to Pharaoh. Okay. Oops. It doesn't work out like this. All right. No, this really should be in another place. All right, forget it. I'll do this I'll just leave it here. I'll make a space above. Okay. And Aaron is 83. Let's see, comments. Okay, Aaron is 83. Aaron, or this Oh, shoot. Time. This proves that the Israelites had been enslaved for at least 80 years when Yahweh sent Moshe to free them. Okay. That's all. Put that here. Send this out. Just like that. And I guess we're good to go. Okay, and let me do one last thing here. Okay, cool. That's that. All right, so verse 8. Yomer Yahweh el Moshe wa el Aharon lemor. So Yahweh said to Moshe and Aaron, saying, verse 9, Ki yidaber alechem par'o lemor tenu lachem mofet. ואמרת אל אהרון, קח את מתך ואשלך לפני פרעה יהי לתנין. If Pharaoh should speak to you, saying, give me a sign, give me a wonder. Okay, in other words, prove, right? So basically, they're going to go to Pharaoh and say, Yahweh is telling us to let the people of Israel go, right? And then perhaps Pharaoh is going to ask for a sign, right? A mofet is usually translated as a wonder. Okay. ואמרת אל אהרון, you should say to Aaron, קח את מתך ואשלך לפני פרעה יהי לתנין. You shall say to Aaron, take your staff and throw it on the ground or send it or cast it before Pharaoh, and it will turn into a serpent. Okay, so Moshe is gonna tell Aaron, okay, so Moshe is gonna tell Aaron to take his staff and cast it on the ground before Pharaoh, and she'll turn into a tanin. Was it his staff? Remember, we saw this trick when Moshe was coming out of Egypt. God showed Moshe a number of parlor tricks, and one of them was for Moshe to take his own staff, throw it on the ground. It was going to turn to a snake, grab its tail, and then it turns back to a staff. Now all of a sudden, it's not Moshe's staff; it's our own staff, right? And then remember, we had another trick, right? We had two other tricks that were mentioned. If we go back for a second, I'll just do it in English to make it go quickly. So it would be around Exodus 3. Where is it? Okay, so here, Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to me? The Lord did not, and say the Lord did not appear to you. So this is now supposed to be a sign before the Israel, right? And then Moses throws the staff on the ground, turns into a snake, grabs it by the tail, turns back, right? And then what if they don't listen to me then? Moses asks, right? Well, he didn't ask, but God just gives him another sign, right? The whole thing where you put your hand inside your cloak and it comes out leprous and then put it back in, right? And there's a third one, which is taking some water from the Nile, pouring it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood, okay? So these are all supposed to be signs, not to Pharaoh, but to the Israelites, right? The Israelites may say, the Lord did not, Yahweh did not appear to you. And then Moses has 3 signs that he's going to give him. One is to throw his staff on the ground. The other is to put his hand in his cloak and it comes out leprous. And then the third is to take some water from the Nile, pour it on the ground, and it turns into blood. Okay? So that's Exodus 4. Now, all of a sudden, it's not Moshe speaking to the Israelites. It's Aaron, or it's Moshe speaking through Aaron, who's going to speak to Pharaoh. And now, all of a sudden, it's not Moshe's staff, it's Aaron's staff. And that's going to turn into a serpent. So what's going on here, right? Well, I guess the easiest explanation is going to be that Moshe just gave his staff to Aaron. And that's what I'm going to stick with, right? But we'll also notice that the second sign, okay, so this is clearly the first sign that was spoken about in Exodus 4. The second sign, the whole thing with the leprous hand, that's never used again. We never hear about that again, right? We don't hear that Moshe did it for the Israelites, and it's skipped over, right? Because the next thing after that is going to be the blood, right? Which was the third sign that God had given Moshe in Exodus chapter 4, right? It's just kind of interesting. So, let's go on. Verse 10. ויבוא משה ואהרון אל פרעה ויעשו כן כאשר ציווה יהוה וישלח אהרון את מטהו לפני פרעה ולפני עבדיו ויהי לתנין. Okay, so Moshe, so they do it. They basically do the trick. It's like kind of a little parlor trick, right? Pull a rabbit out of a hat, turn a staff into a snake. But or so I would claim. Well, I'll tell you what I would claim in a second. Verse 11. ויקרא גם פרעה לחכמים ולמכשפים ויעשו גם חרטומי מצרים ולהטיהם. Okay. So Pharaoh called his wise men and his wizards, and the wise men or the magicians, the Egyptian magicians, that's the way this is usually translated as Khartume, Mitzrayim, the Egyptian magicians, did the same with their black arts or their magic arts, okay? So that they were able to replicate the task, right? וישליכו איש מטהו ויהיו לתנינים. So they each cast their staff on the ground, and they became snakes. ויבלע מטה אהרון את מטותם. But Aaron's staff swallowed their staffs, right? So okay, so what's going on here? So I would say that first of all, there's a question about magic or black magic, okay? I do not believe in any way, shape, or form in magic or black magic or any of that stuff, okay? If someone comes to me and says they have magic incantations and whatever, I don't know, whatever, I will laugh in their face. I don't believe that magic or black magic are real. I think they're completely fake. I think they don't exist. And so anything that the Egyptian magicians are going to do are just parlor tricks, right? They're like pulling a bunny out of a hat or pulling someone's wallet out of your ear or something like that, right? All that kind of stuff. However, when Moshe is doing it, since it's God basically creating miracles, we do see many times that God does create things that go against nature. What comes to mind? The donkey of Bil'am that starts talking to him, right? Would be something that comes to mind. There are many other examples, right? That in the case of Moshe, that it is God doing these things, and that's why Moshe's staff is able to eat the staves, or Moshe's snake is able to eat the staves of Aaron's. Now Aaron's staff is able to eat the staff or the snakes of the other ones, right? So these Egyptian because I don't believe that black magic ever existed, or ever can, or will exist. I also don't think that the Torah actually believes that such a thing exists. Okay. I can go into a long tangent here about all these Kabbalists that pretend to use all kinds of black magic and incantations, and I would literally laugh in their faces. It's all gobbledygook. It has no power whatsoever. It has no reality whatsoever. It's just nonsense, complete and utter nonsense. Okay, so I think what the Egyptian magicians did, were just simple parlor tricks, like pulling a bunny out of a hat. They were able to, maybe they had a snake nearby. The snake turned into the staff turned into a snake, etc., etc. But in the case of Moshe, it was a real thing that happened, and therefore God allowed Moshe's staff to eat or Moshe's snake to eat the other snakes. That's just my opinion. You may agree with me, you may disagree with me. Okay, verse 13. And the Yechazek le Paro heart, Pharaoh's heart was strengthened. Before we saw it was hardened, or it would be hardened. Ani makshe. Where was it? Ani akshe le Paro. I will harden the heart of Paro. Okay. Here we see that it was strengthened. Okay, it's similar, right? Hardened and strengthened, right? And afterwards, you can see it's made heavy. Okay. So we see all of these different phrases used regarding the heart of Pharaoh. So Pharaoh has a hardened heart. Moshe has uncircumcised lips, at least in his own eyes, right? So, and now we have these parlor tricks going on, and Moshe's serpent, which is actually coming from, shall we say, a miracle from God, is able to swallow the serpents that the Egyptian magicians pulled out of a hat. Okay, and we see honestly that the Egyptian magicians are able to do no more than simple parlor tricks, right? Nothing that if you went to see, I don't know what a famous magician is.
Brother,
yeah,
I have a comment of what you
yes,
said,
Yuma.
that you don't believe in any type of sorcery. I agree with you, because Numbers 23:23 talks about where there is no divination in Jacob and no sorcery in Israel.
Right. So, and actually, Phil has a comment, which is he disagrees. Witchcraft is forbidden not because it is witchcraft is forbidden not because it is impossible. Okay, so that's a fair statement and that's a fair idea. Okay, again, my personal opinion is that it doesn't exist, that there's no such thing as witchcraft or any of that stuff. But people believe that it is possible and that it is true. And that's why the Torah forbids lo tinachashu velo ti'onenu, and right, tinachashu is understood as divination, right? So, the Torah does not want the Israelites following or using these things. Okay, let's put it this way. Okay, let's take tarot cards, for instance. All right, some people might say that tarot cards are real, right? You can divine the future from tarot cards and they have actual power or something like that. I remember very, very many years ago when I was first getting into Torah, I had a friend who was actually also an Orthodox Jew, and he said, "Oh, we're going to do tarot cards today," and we would do tarot cards, and it was really fun and interesting, and he was telling me all about my future and all this kind of stuff. You could really get into believing it. But the fact that someone could sit down and divine using tarot cards doesn't mean that that's the truth. But nonetheless, the Torah would forbid doing something like that, because it's playing the game as if we're doing divination, or let's say reading to onanu. Some people say means reading the clouds, right? Finding the future by reading the clouds, right? Does that mean that you can read the clouds to predict the future? I don't think so. But it's something that the pagans, that the other nations did, because they believe that it has some reality. Like astrology maybe would be the classic example, right? How many people are into astrology, which I believe is, again, just a complete bunch of nonsense. That's my personal opinion, right? But all of these kinds of things, reading the stars to predict the future, or to to give information about our personalities based on the positions of the stars or what might happen, this is all what's forbidden in the Torah, and it doesn't not have to have any validity for it to be forbidden. It's just that the other nations believe that it's true, and so therefore it's forbidden. We're not supposed to fall into that rabbit hole. I can give another kind of proof, right? It's forbidden in the Torah for us to worship other gods. Okay, do other gods exist? Of course not. There's no other God, right? We know there's only one God in this universe, and that's Yahweh. So why are we forbidden to worship other gods? Why are we forbidden to bow down before other gods, or even mention the names of other gods, right? it doesn't imply that this is forbidden because they exist. They don't exist, but we could fall into this trap, this false trap of idol worship and superstition and divination and all of that crap that the nations are involved in, not because there's any truth to it, not because there's any validity or any power whatsoever, but because it specifically because it doesn't, because the nations believe it do. So believe it does. So let them worship their idols, their false gods, even though the gods don't exist. Let them read their tea leaves, even though that means nothing. Let them try to predict the lotto number by, reading their horoscopes, even though they can't. They can do all of that nonsense, but we are only to rely when we want answers, whether it's what will happen in the future or what we should do or insight. We go to one place and one place only, and that's directly to Yahweh. In fact, we're not even allowed to have ovot and yidonim. We're not even allowed to speak to the dead, ask the dead. Right? We have the famous example of the of Endor, the witch of Endor, where Shaul goes to call up Samuel, Shmuel, to ask him what he should do. Right? And even that is not allowed. We're not supposed to even go to the dead, even though the dead are a real thing. And Shaul was actually able to speak to Samuel through this witch of Endor, right? So we know that people die, and we know hopefully they will come back to life again. So that is real, in my opinion. But we're not even allowed to do that. If we want answers, we don't use divination. We don't use parlor tricks. We don't try to project our power through these, pulling bunnies out of a hat and saying it's black magic. We don't try to alter the course of the universe, with incantations which don't work anyway. We don't worship false gods which don't exist. Even none of those things exist, in my opinion. We're still forbidden to do them because this is what the nations do. The nations they grasp onto these false ideas, these false gods, these false powers, thinking that they have actual power when they don't exist at all. So I would say that black magic falls into the same category as a foreign god. It doesn't exist. However, tell a Hindu that Shiva doesn't exist. Okay, tell a what would be another example? I don't know. What's another god in another religion? You got one?
Thor.
Tell a Norwegian, that Thor, or a Norwegian returning to his roots, that Thor doesn't exist, right? Of course they don't. There's no Thor. There's no Zeus. There's no Shiva. Maybe Shiva's the best because it's the most common that we see around us. But these people, they believe in their false gods. They also believe in this in black magic. They believe in all kinds of crazy things, and we're not supposed to fall into those traps. And maybe God is going to trick them and make it look like some of it comes true, right? Who knows? I don't know what he does. That's his cheshmonot. That's his things. But as for me, I don't believe any of it exists whatsoever. It's just all nonsense, just as the existence of any other gods is nonsense. And nonetheless, we're supposed to avoid all of this. That's my opinion. Isaiah 24:21, on the day the Lord will punish the host of heaven in heaven and on earth, the kings of the earth. Well, we'd have to look at that, but the host of heaven might be referring to angels, right? I'd have to look at the exact verse and get the context and all this kind of stuff, but I don't think that necessarily implies any kind of black magic. Okay, yeah, tell a Christian that Jesus doesn't exist, right? What was it? I used to watch. What was his name? Ali G. If you ever saw that comedian, Sacha Baron Cohen, and he asks a priest. He says, "Tell me something. Does Jesus exist, or is it just your father dressed up in a red suit?" Anyway, whatever. So neither here nor there. So I don't believe any of this stuff exists. If you want, we could look at Isaiah 24:20. I want to move ahead. That's my personal opinion. Okay, that's my personal opinion. So my personal opinion is that but miracles do exist, right? We know that the sun stood still in the valley of Ayalon when Yeshua went out to fight. We know that Bilam's donkey spoke to Bilam, right? We know that the Red Sea split, right? If we are Torah believers, which I am, right? So we know that miracles do exist. God can make these things happen, but these cannot be replicated through divination or black magic or anything else. That's my opinion. So I think that what the Egyptian magicians are doing are just stupid parlor tricks, okay? But what Moshe is doing, because these are signs from God, I'm sorry, it's Aaron in this case, what Aaron is doing are real, shall we say, use the word miracles, okay? So the Egyptian magicians don't know what they're up against, right? They're doing these stupid little parlor tricks, right? Telling you how many dollars you have in your wallet and pulling a bunny out of a hat and cutting a person in two and then putting them back together again using mirrors or whatever they use. But Moshe's playing the real game, and that's why very soon the Egyptian magicians have to bow out of the game, and their defeat is clear. Okay, that's my opinion. I'm fully willing to listen to other opinions, and I appreciate your opinion, Phil. We could talk about it, some other time. I want to move ahead now, but I'm just giving you my personal opinion. Okay, so I would say, to sum it up, just as foreign gods are mentioned throughout the Tanakh, and just as it is forbidden in the Ten Commandments, right, to bow down before these foreign gods, right? So, and even though they don't exist, they're a figment of imagination. Shiva is a figment of a believing Hindu's imagination, right? But nonetheless, it's forbidden to bow down to these gods or say their names by the Torah. Okay, so the same with divination. Even though divination is forbidden, that doesn't imply, or black magic is forbidden, that doesn't imply that it actually exists. The Torah does forbid things, forbid us from engaging in things that are complete falsehoods and complete figments of people's imaginations. Okay, so that's my opinion, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Okay, so I don't think I am, but who knows? Stranger things have happened. Okay, that's my belief on the issue. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. All right. So where were we? Yeah. So we had the staff. So we mentioned the three signs that were given to Moshe. Only the first and the third sign is used. We see nothing about the leper's hand. Right. That's just disappears off into the sunset. Right. Off into the ether. Never hear about it again. But we do see the first one. It's now magically quote unquote transformed into Aaron's staff, and Aaron turns his staff, which probably I'm guessing was just Moshe's staff, into a serpent. And now we have blood. Blood was the third sign, right? You're going to take. So we saw in Exodus 4. Well, maybe you should feed the cats because Sophie's meowing. Yeah. Okay. So I'll be done soon. I'll be done with half an hour, and then we'll give the cats some attention. All right. So So we saw the third sign that Moshe was given is to take some water from the Or, from the Nile, and throw it on the ground, and it would turn into blood. So now we go directly to the third one, which is now officially the first plague. We're in the first plague, blood. You all know that if you've been to a Passover Seder. Okay, verse 14. Yomer Yahweh el Moshe kaved lev paro ma'in nishalach ha'am. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Pharaoh's heart is, and how here we have the third description of Pharaoh's heart, which is heavy. Okay. You have to do something. She's going crazy in there. Okay. I don't know. All right. So then I guess I'll just have to wait. Okay. So Yahweh says to Moshe, Pharaoh's heart is heavy. He refuses to let the people go. Okay. So now we're going to start the plagues. Okay. And it is really kind of getting late, so I think I should just go through the rest of the parsha with minimum commentary, as I do sometimes when we get to this stage, because I want to end within the next half an hour. We've got to feed the cats. We have a whole bunch of things going on here. So, okay. But nonetheless, we see now Pharaoh's heart is heavy. Okay. Those of you who have heard Egyptologists speak on this issue will commonly point out that the idea of a heavy heart they speak about. So there's the Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, whereby when the Egyptians believed when you die, your heart is weighed against the feather. It's put on the scales, on the Oznaim, the scales, and if your heart is heavier than a feather, then I forgot what happens to you, but it's not good. You go to Egyptian hell or something like that. It gets eaten by a demon. It ain't good, right? So it's always pointed out that this is a very specific phrase that Pharaoh's heart was heavy. implying or referencing that idea that the Egyptians believed that once they died, that their heart was measured against a feather, and it was heavier than a feather, and then basically they go to their version of hell, right? But we've seen now 3 descriptions of Pharaoh's heart. We saw that it was hardened, we saw that it was made strong, Pharaoh. We saw that here in verse 13, and now we're seeing that his heart is heavy. So hardened, made strong, made heavy. Okay, these are different epithets or different descriptions used for Pharaoh's heart. Okay. And he refuses to send the people. Verse 15. Lech et paro baboker. Hine yotze hamayma wa nitzavta li qarato al sefat hayor we het mate asher nehfach le nahash tikach biadecha. Okay, so here's interesting thing, right? So now God is speaking to who? To Moshe. Okay. And now Moshe is going to take the staff, right? So that staff, which Aaron had thrown on the floor before, now it's back in Moshe's hand, and he's going to be the one to stretch it over the Nile and have it turn to blood. Okay. We're running late, so I'm going to just now move ahead, try to get to the end of the parsha, which is minimal commentary. Okay. Verse 16, where Amarta Elau Yahweh Elohei Ha'ivriim Shilahani Elecha Lemor Shalah Et Ami Uyavduni Bamidbar Wahine Lo Shamata Ad Ko. Okay, so you refuse to listen still. Verse 17, you can follow along, by the way. If you're following along, you can follow along in your English translation or Spanish or Portuguese or whatever language you wish. Okay, I'm just going to read the Hebrew, and either I'll just give a quick paraphrase. In some cases, I won't translate at all, so please follow along in your whatever language you choose. Or I might give a quick paraphrase of the verse, or in some specific cases, I might translate word for word and go into it a bit deeper. But I'm going to try to keep that to a minimum because we're running close to 3 hours now. So, okay. Ko amar Yahweh bezot tid'ah ki ani Yahweh hine anochi makeh b'mateh asher biyadi. One second. Hine anochi makeh b'mateh asher biyadi al hamayim asher biyaor u'nefchu ledam. Just want to see one thing. So this is an interesting phrase as well. He tells Moshe to say to Pharaoh, okay, so says Yahweh. Yahweh. Okay, no, forget it. I was going to make a point, but I don't think it's I take it back. Okay. Nefchu ledam. Okay. We ha da asher biyaor tamut ba'ash hayaor wanil'u Misraim lishtot mayim min hayaor. This word ba'ash we saw before. The Israelites complained. I'm sorry, it was actually the taskmasters, or I should say the kapos, the head, the Jewish kapos that complained to Pharaoh. I'm sorry, they complained to Moshe that he was making their smell stink in the eyes of Pharaoh, and putting a sword in his hand. That's that same root there, ba'ash. So the Nile will stink. It will be vile. It will be putrid. Okay, and they won't want to drink water from the Nile. ויאמר יהוה אל משה אמור אל אהרון קח מתך ונטה ידך. So now it's Aaron has the staff again. I'm sorry, I said Moshe before. It's actually Aaron in this place. ידך על מימי מצרים על נהרותם על יאוריהם ועל רמיהם ועל כל מקווה מימיהם ויהיו דם והיה דם בכל ארץ מצרים. So basically all of Egypt is going to be completely covered with blood. Verse 20. ויעשו כן משה ואהרון כאשר ציווה יהוה וירם במטה ויח את המים אשר ביאור לעיני פרעה ולעיני עבדיו ויהפכו כל המים אשר ביאור לדם. So everything turned into blood. והדגה אשר ביאור מתה ויבאש היאור ולא יכלו מצרים לשתות מים מן היאור ויהי הדם מכל ארץ מצרים. So the fish died. The Nile became completely putrid. They couldn't drink water from the Nile, and the blood was all over the place. Not only in the Nile, we saw, right? Also in the rivers and the lakes, everywhere. Everything in the trees and in the rocks over here, right? Everything was full of putrid, disgusting, rotting blood. Verse 22. So now it says, and the Egyptian magicians did the same, or did so, it says, right? They did so. Does it really mean that they were able to replicate this entire thing? Does it even make sense? Would the Egyptian magicians turn all of Egypt into a stink so that people couldn't drink water again for another however many days it was, 7 days, Yimale Shivat Yamim, right? Of course not, right? So this implies to me, what did the Egyptian magicians do? Okay, they probably took some water, dropped it on the floor, and it turned red, and they said, we were able to turn the water into blood. Again, parlor tricks. All we see from the Egyptian magicians, in my strong opinion, is stupid little parlor tricks. And what we see from the side of Moshe and Aaron, who has God behind him doing actual quote-unquote miracles or plagues, we'll call them plagues, not miracles, because they're bad things, not good things, and miracle implies a good thing, at least in English, right? At least they're good for us, the Israelites. Those are real things that are going on, right? Moshe's snake ate the others, or Aaron's snake ate the other snakes. Here, when Moshe does the blood thing, all of Egypt is of stinky, disgusting, rotting blood all over the place for 7 days, okay? But when the Egyptian magicians do it, what do? They pull a rabbit out of a hat. They turn a stick into a snake. They take a drop of blood, throw it on the floor, and it turns red. So why does Pharaoh listen to him? The reason that Pharaoh listens to them, Pharaoh uses these stupid little parlor tricks of his own magicians to listen to them and refuse to send the people. Why does he do that? Because his heart has been made hard. His heart has been strengthened. His heart, or has been made strong, has been made stubborn. His heart has been made heavy, right? So he's going to believe he's going to grasp onto any little straw he can grasp onto to believe that Moshe and Aaron are just doing stupid little, or doing, he doesn't believe his Egyptian magicians are doing parlor tricks, that his Egyptian magicians can do the same things that Moshe and Aaron can do. So therefore it's not from God. I don't have to listen to them, and I'm not going to send them, right? That's what's going on here, in my opinion. Okay, verse 23. And so Pharaoh turned. So after the Egyptian magicians did it, Pharaoh went back to his house, and he did not turn his heart, or did not let his heart be moved. Also be for this, okay? He had this little straw that he was able to grasp onto, that his Egyptian magicians were able to do the same thing, even though there's no way, it wouldn't even make logical sense that they could replicate what Moshe did, and because they wouldn't do it anyway. Okay. All right. Verse 24. Peru kol Misraim svivot hayaor mayim lishtot ki lo yachlu lishtot mimei hayaor. So they dug for water because they couldn't drink from the Nile River. And 7 days passed with this plague in place, and then apparently it subsided. Okay. And there's all kinds of studies about, so they usually often divide the plagues into three groups of 3, making 9, where each of the first ones in each group have certain similarities. The second ones have certain similarities. Third ones have certain similarities. For instance, in some cases, the length of the plague is determined. In some cases, it's not. I don't remember. You'd have to look it all up, and I'm not going to organize a table for it right now. But the plagues are often organized into 3 groups of 3, and then the last one, the 10th, is separate, because that was the killing of the firstborn, and that's obviously different and special. Just pointing that out if you want to look into it. Okay. Verse 1. Wayomer Yahweh el Moshe bo el paro wa amar ta elao ko amar Yahweh shalach et ami we avduni. So Yahweh said to Moshe, go to Pharaoh and say to him, so says Yahweh, let my people go so that they may serve me. Okay. Verse 2. Let's try that again. Verse 2. Wa'im ma'en אתה לשלח, הנה אנוכי נורף את כל גבולך בצפרדעים. If you don't do it, you're getting frogs. ושרץ היאור צפרדעים ועלו ובאו בביתך ובחדר משכבך ועל מיטתך ובבית עבדיך ובעמך ובתנוריך ובמשערותיך. So if not, the frogs are going to be anywhere. I'll just point out very quickly, it's going to be in the kneading bowls. The kneading bowls are mentioned later on when the Israelites go out of Egypt. They go out with kneading bowls on their shoulders, it says, and this leads to the mitzvah, or one of the reasons that it leads to the mitzvah of matzah, of unleavened bread. Okay, verse 4. Okay, so the frogs are going to be all over your people, you and your people. ויאמר יהוה אל משה, אמור אל אהרון תא את ידך במטך על הנהרות, על היורים ועל האגמים, ועל את הצפרדעים על ארץ מצרים. So now Aaron casts out his hand with the staff. Here we go with the staff again. Okay, over all of the rivers and the Yaorim, they sometimes translate streams. Verse 6, Wayet Aaron et yado al mimei Mitzrayim v'ta'al hatzvardea v'tachas et eretz Mitzrayim. So it says now uses the frog in singular. The rabbis have this stupid midrash regarding that one frog came out and they broke it to 2, into 4, into 8. And of course, just to point out very quickly, even though it's used in the singular, it's very common in the Torah to use a singular word to represent the whole, just like we would in English. So let's say, I don't know, what would be an example? I don't know, I can't think of an example offhand, but it's common in English as well, where you use a singular to represent the whole, the general idea. Something I'll mention. Okay. So, point is that the rabbis always accuse the Karaites of taking things too literally, but they're the ones who generally take things too literally. And here they say that a single frog came out of the river, and of course that's not the case, right? Okay. And so then the Egyptian magicians also were able to bring some frogs up into the land of Egypt, again giving Pharaoh a nice straw to hang on to reject the plea of Moshe and Aaron to let the Israelites go. Verse 8, ויקרא פרעה למשה ולאהרון ויאמר עתירו אל יהוה ויסר הצפרדעים. But here we have the first time that Pharaoh gives an inch, right? This is the first time he gives in even a drop, okay? He comes to Moshe and asks them to pray or to entreat Yahweh to get rid of the frogs, right? So obviously this is Pharaoh admitting that Moshe's version of the frogs was something a little bit more than the Egyptian magicians, who probably said, whatever it is, Ali Kabubu, blah, 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 and a couple of frogs came out, that the other guy was hiding in the water, released the frogs, and they came up onto the shore, and, whatever. And maybe a puff of smoke to make it look good and all, or who knows. At any rate, okay, but this is the first time Pharaoh gives in. This is his first concession, okay? His first sign of weakness, his first sign that the bus is being turned around in the other direction, to use that analogy we used before, and heading well into the direction of the Israelites, right? Pharaoh asks Moshe to get rid of the frogs. He hasn't given an inch before, right? He didn't believe the plague of the blood. He didn't believe the thing with the snakes. He just used it. He saw his Egyptian magicians doing it, and just used that as an excuse to harden his heart. Right here, even though the Egyptian magicians were able to somehow recreate some semblance of that parlor trick or of that task, nonetheless, Pharaoh must see here that the Israelite version is very different, is qualitatively and quantitatively different from that of the Egyptian magicians, and therefore he has to go ask Moshe and Aaron to get rid of these frogs, right? Okay, we said it's for the imimeni u'me'amim ve'ashelcha et ha'am ve'yizbachu liyahweh, and then I'll let the people go, and they can sacrifice to Yahweh. Okay. All right. I could go into a whole long talk about how this is a classic example of a neder, or of a thing where a person is in dire straits and he makes a promise to Yahweh, right? And then, God forbid, I don't know, I'll take an example. You get diagnosed with, God forbid, lo aleinu, get diagnosed with, let's say, I won't even make it. Let's say you have a let's not make it that heavy. Let's say make something lighter. Okay. I don't know. You have a $500 traffic fine, and you say, God, if I can get out of this $500 traffic fine, I swear I will donate $100 to charity. Okay. You're in dire straits. You don't want to pay the $500, right? And then you get out of it, and then hopefully you're going to pay the $100, but you're very tempted at that point to say, I didn't really need God. I would have gotten out of it anyway. I'm not feeling the pain and suffering anymore. So, so maybe I won't give the $100 or something like that. Okay. That's the other way people make swears. They swear things to God when they're usually in some kind of dire straits. And then if they actually get out of straits, then it becomes a real challenge to fulfill that which they promised, which is why Torah says better not to make a vow at all. It's best that you don't make a vow at all. It says it explicitly, right? So it's the same idea here. Pharaoh's in dire straits. He kind of makes this promise that he'll send the nation away. He makes it to God in a sense, right? Hatiru el Yahweh, right? That he should remove the frogs. By the way, this is kind of his first recognition that God can do, that Yahweh, that our God, the God of Israel, has any power or existence or can do anything at all. So this is a huge concession by Pharaoh. And quite frankly, it's the beginning of the end. It's all downhill for Pharaoh from here, right? But at any rate, my point is he makes this vow basically to Yahweh. But then as soon as he's out of his difficult straits, does he pay his $100 after he got out of the $500 traffic fine? No, of course not. He reneges on his word to Yahweh and goes back to his old ways. And he does this a bunch of times until basically he destroys himself. So this is a classic example of a neder, of a vow that we take in the name of God, and how it's done in difficult times, and how important it is to pay it once those difficult times disappear, something which Pharaoh does not do again and again and again until ultimately he's destroyed. Okay. ויאמר משה לפרעה, התפאר עלי למתי אעתיר לך ולעבדיך לעמך ולאחרית הצפרדעים ממך ומבתיך רק באור תישארנה. Okay. So now Moshe wants to prove how strong Yahweh is. He's going to say to Pharaoh, you tell me the time. Okay. And he's going to prove that it's not just like parlor tricks this time, right? Because Pharaoh is going to set the time when the frogs disappear. So 3:14 p.m. tomorrow, right? And if they appear at 3:14 p.m. tomorrow, that's such an unusual coincidence that it's designed to make Pharaoh realize that this God Yahweh, who he rejected and refused to even acknowledge the existence of, does in fact exist and have real power, unlike his stupid sun god or whatever the heck he was worshiping at that time. And so he says tomorrow. In order that you should, so he says tomorrow, and then Moshe says, okay, as you say, in order. What's the reason for this? Exactly as we said, in order that you should know that there is none like our God Yahweh, right? So what does it mean that there's none like our God Yahweh? There are no other gods at all, right? As we said before, right? So, but these nations believe there are other gods, right? So if they're going to continue to believe in their stupid God, their stupid gods, whatever they are, but they're going to realize slowly but surely that the only God, there's none other like Yahweh, because he's the only real God. All the others are figments of the imagination or distortions of one's perception, shall we say. Okay, it's only going to remain in the Nile or in the rivers. Verse 12, why it's Moshe wa Aaron ma'im Paro. So in the second one, we see it says that Moshe and Aaron went away from Pharaoh. And I think in each group, remember we said there are 3 groups of 3. I think in the second plague of each group, it mentions explicitly that Moshe and Aaron left Pharaoh. Again, I don't remember. There's a whole little charts that you can find where they compare the first, second, and third plague of each of the 3 groups. In other words, 1, 4, 7, 2, 5, 8, 3, 6, 9, and then 10 is kept separately. Okay, verse 12. ויצא משה ואהרון מעם פרעה ויצעק משה אל יהוה על דבר הצפרדעים אשר שם לפרעה. So Moshe goes and cries out to God. ויעש יהוה כדבר משה וימותו הצפרדעים מן הבתים מן החצרות ומן השדות. And so God makes all the frogs die. But he doesn't get rid of them, they just die. Verse 14, ויצברו אותם חמרים, 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 ותבאש הארץ, and the land stunk. Okay, again, that's that word tiv'ash, that the Israelite couples were worried that the Israelites, that they would have a stink in the nose of Pharaoh, and that he would use that, and that he would kill them. Okay, so here we have that same word tiv'ash. So the land stunk. They piled the frogs up into big piles, and the whole land stunk, just like it did from the blood. So it said from the blood that the land stunk. We'll go with stank. The land stank from the blood. The land is now stinking from the frogs, right? So let's put it this way. It's kind of like, I don't know, I guess going through Egypt at the time would have kind of been like going through New Jersey or something like that. Okay. וירא פרעה כי הייתה הרווחה ואכבד את ליבו ולא שמעה עליהם כאשר דיבר יהוה. So this is exactly what we're saying. This is explicit, right? Pharaoh saw that there was harivacha. Rivacha means like relief. Okay. Pharaoh saw there was relief, ואכבד את ליבו, and he made his heart heavy. Again, remember the idea of the heavy heart, the light heart in Egyptian mythology regarding death. Okay, ולא שמע עליהם כאשר דיבר יהוה. Okay, and he did not listen to them as kasher diber Yahweh, as Yahweh had spoken. Okay, so here we have again this idea that once things are relief, once he gets a little bit of relief, he goes back to his old ways. He breaks his vow that he made to Yahweh through Moshe. Okay, verse 16. ויאמר יהוה אל משה אמור אל אהרון נטה את מטך והך את עפר הארץ והיה לכינים בכל ארץ מצרים. So now Aaron's going to take his staff, flap it on the ground, and up is going to come lice. Or they usually translate it here as lice. What do they translate here as? Yeah, they translate here as lice. I've seen different lice. I've seen other things, gnats, all kinds of different things. We'll go with lice. ויעשו כן, ועת אהרון את ידו במטהו, ויח את עפר הארץ, ותהי הקינם באדם ובבהמה. כל עפר הארץ היה קינים בכל ארץ מצרים. So everything, so all of the dust of the land, right? So symbolically, he thwacked his stick on the ground, dust came up, and now all of this dust turned into, right? That was kind of symbolic, and now it's as if all of the dust of Egypt, or maybe all of the dust of Egypt, or a lot of the dust of Egypt, did turn into lice, and they were all over human beings and on the animals as well. Verse 19, ויאמרו החרטומים אל פרעה אצבע אלוהים היא ויחזק לב פרעה ולא שמעה עליהם כאשר דיבר יהוה. And now the Egyptian magicians say to Pharaoh, Etzba Elohim hi. This is the finger of God. Okay, the Egyptian magicians at this point they bow out. They say we cannot replicate this. This is the finger of God. Something else is going on here that is supernatural, that is above and beyond us, that is coming from the divine. Etzba Elohim hi. Okay, in doing so, they seem to recognize implicitly that there is a God above all gods. A lot of these idol worshippers like the Hindus, actually, if you drill down, they kind of somewhere deep down in their subconscious realize that there is a single God that's above all of their other fake gods. And that's exactly what the Egyptian magician seems to be saying here, right? This is the finger of the real God. This is not our little, pretend gods and our pretend magic. This is the finger of God. This is the real thing, okay? But that didn't help. Pharaoh's heart became strengthened. Okay. We'll go for another 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm going to stop. I guess we'll go to the end of this chapter. So now we're up to the 4th plague. We're in Exodus chapter 8, verse 20. ויאמר יהוה אל משה, השכם בבוקר והתייצב לפני פרעה, הנה יוצא המימה ואמרת אליו, כה אמר יהוה, שלח עמי ויעבדוני. Okay, so you're going to go out to him while he's bathing in the river and give him the old "let my people go" thing. Maybe he even sang to them, "Let my people go." Verse 21, כי אם אינך משלח את עמי, הנני משליח בך ובעבדיך ובעמך ובבתיך את הערוב ומלאו בתי מצרים את הערוב וגם האדמה אשר הם עליה. By the way, the reason if you see me kind of like on some words reading a bit slow, I'm trying very hard to recreate ancient Israelite accent. So just bear with me, right? I'm trying to make a distinction, for instance, between the kamatz, which is under this ayin here, and the patach, the patach, which is under, let's say, this hey over here, right? So I'm just trying to really kind of perfect what some scholars believe is the ancient Israelite accent. Okay, so at any rate, so basically, okay, now we're going to have the erov. The erov is often translated as, okay, this is flies or gnats, I've seen it as. So now we get more little insect thingies. Okay. Verse 22. ויפלט לי ביום ההוא את ארץ גושן אשר עמי עומד עליה לביתי היות שם ערוב למען תדע כי אני יהוה בקרב הארץ. Okay, so he's going to make a distinction. He's going to distinguish the land of Goshen. Remember, that's where Jacob and his family were settled. Okay, so there's not going to be any gnats or flies in the land of Goshen. Okay, and why is that? In order that you should know that I am Yahweh in the midst of the land. The land here speaking about the land of Egypt. In other words, in order that you should know that I, Yahweh, this God who is not in your pantheon, who you wouldn't even recognize, who you basically said, I don't know who Yahweh is, and I will not listen to him, and I will not let the children of Israel go. Now, God says, Yahweh says, I'm going to do this in order that I, Yahweh, I am the Lord, or I am Yahweh, Bekerev haaretz, over Egypt as well. I rule over Egypt. I rule over the land of Egypt, just as I rule over everywhere. But in this case, I rule over the land of Egypt, not your false gods. Okay, I'm the ruler of Egypt, and now and he's going to do this in order to know, right? Because he's going to say, okay, I say where the gnats go, and I say where they don't go. They don't go in Goshen, they go everywhere else. So I'm controlling the land of Egypt. Okay, your sun god Ra is not controlling the land of Egypt, or whoever else is in your pantheon, they're not controlling the land of Egypt. I, Yahweh, not me, excuse me, but you know what I mean. I, Yahweh, rule over the land of Egypt. V'samti pedut ben ami uben amecha lemachar yeh azot hazeh. Okay. And I will place a pedut liftot. It literally means like a redemption, but it means a distinction, shall we say, between my people and your people tomorrow. Okay. Verse 24. V'yas Yahweh ken vi yavo arov kaved bet Pharaoh ubeit avadav v'chol eretz Mitzrayim v'tishachet haaretz mipnei ha'arov. Excuse me. Okay. So that's it. That's the gnats. Let's see if we can finish off this chapter, and then we'll stop. ויקרא פרעה אל משה ולאהרון ויאמר לכו זבחו לאלוהיכם בארץ. So now Pharaoh calls for Moshe and Aaron. So I think that might be one of the characteristics of the third group of each group of three, and says, go worship your God. So now Pharaoh is seemingly, at least for the moment, again, giving in, okay, because the whole land is covered with these gnats. Verse 26, ויאמר משה לא נכון לעשות כן כי תועבת מצרים. I'm sorry, I missed an important point. Ba'aretz, okay? So Pharaoh's not really giving in. He's trying to do masao matan. He thinks he's at the shuk in Jerusalem. He's trying to bargain with the Israelites, and he's saying, okay, you can worship your God, but in Egypt you can't go out into the desert, right? And so Moshe comes up with some lame excuse, which is basically just, it's kind of meant almost to taunt Pharaoh in a sense, or to make it look like there's a reason other than the fact that God has decided, Yahweh has now decided that he's going to send his people out. He's trying to give like some kind of logical reason why they can't do it. Again, I'd get into the psychology of it if we had a bit more time. It's very interesting, but I want to finish off this chapter. ויאמר משה, לא נכון לעשות כן, כי תועבת מצרים נזבח ליהוה אלוהינו, הן נזבח את תועבת מצרים לעיניהם ולא יסגלונו. So he says we can't do it within the land of Egypt because we're going to be sacrificing the To'avat Mitzrayim, the abomination of Egypt, which apparently many people believe is the sheep. Okay, so and we can't do it in the land. If we do it in the land, isn't it clear that your people are gonna stone us, right? So he's giving them some logical reason, but the real reason, of course, is to to show who's the boss. דרך 3 ימים נלך במדבר וזבחנו ליהוה אלוהינו כאשר יאמר אלינו. We're going to go out into the desert for 3 days and do it there. Verse 28, ויאמר פרעה אנוכי אשלח אתכם וזבחתם ליהוה אלוהיכם במדבר רק הרחק לא תרחיקו ללכת עתירו בעדי. Okay, fine. He says you can go and also pray to God for me. Mention me to God, to Yahweh. יאמר משה הנה אנוכי יוצא מעמך והתרתי אל יהוה ושר הערוב מפרעה מעבדיו ומעמו מחר רק אל יוסף פרעה התל לוויתי שלח את העם לזבוח ליהוה. So basically again Pharaoh makes this bargain under duress. So first he tries to do a little bit of good old Jerusalem shuk bargaining and get them to do the sacrifices in the land. Then Moshe comes up with this lame excuse about, we can't sacrifice the abomination of Egypt in the land. We have to go out. So Pharaoh says, okay, fine. Go out for 3 days. Okay. And don't go too far. And also ask God to stop the plague, right? And then Moshe says, listen, we've played this game before. You said you were gonna let us go. And then as soon as you had a little bit of relief, where was that? Arivacha. Up here. Oops, I just clicked on something that I didn't want to click on. Let's go back. Arivacha, that was in the second plague of frogs. Then you reneged on your deal, and you're going to do it again. I mean, how can we trust you? You're just going to do that again, okay? So Moshe says, "Rak al Yosef Paro atel levirti shalach et ha'am lizbach leYahweh." Okay. So Moshe says, don't do this again. Okay, no more of your games. Okay. We at say Moshe ma'im Pharaoh we ater el Yahweh. So Moshe entreats Yahweh on behalf of Pharaoh to end the plagues. Yas Yahweh kidvar Moshe v'yasar ha'he rov mi Pharaoh mi vodao mi amo lo nishar ehad. And that's it. The gnats disappeared. ויכבד פרעה את ליבו גם בפעם הזאת ולא שילח את העם. And Pharaoh made his heart heavy also this time and did not let the people go. So again, he reneged, right? As soon as he was out of the dire straits, then he reneged on his bargain. Okay, so then we go on to other things which are extremely, extremely important, especially in the having to do with the Karaites, because we have here in Exodus 9, verse, where is it? One second. Yeah, one second. Where can I find it? I don't know. I can't find it for some strange reason. One second. I can't find it right now, but it mentions that the Aviv. I should know by heart which verse this is, and I cannot find it for some strange reason. Having a mind block. Okay, whatever. Any rate, we have the livestock, the boils, the hail, and that more or less is the end of the parsha. But I'm going to end it here because it's getting pretty late. Okay, I'll ask if anyone has any final questions or comments before we end the study. Anybody? No? All right, then. Well, if not, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to thank you all for the study. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom or a Shavua Tov, depending on where you are in this world. And we will, Be'ezrat Yahweh, reconvene next week, more or less at the same time, which is 5 o'clock p.m. Jerusalem time. And I'll send out an announcement. And please tell your friends, tell your family. I'd really like to start growing the audience and really getting people to start coming to study. So anyone you know who might be interested, please let them know. And that's all I got for today. So I wish you all a Shavua Tov and a Shabbat Shalom. Put on a little bit of music, and we'll take it from there.
אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יום השמש יפרח בלילה, השם מורך מכל רע, ישמור את עליך, ומשמור צאתך, ואדם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מאש בארץ, אל תמות לך, אל תשמרך, יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי אוי מקימי מעפר דם, מהשפות ירים אביון, אוי להושיבי עם נדיבי עמו, תבינאי נאי 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 תנאי נאי נאי תנאי נאי 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 נאי. כי השם אלוקינו המקביל לשבת, אוי בשמיים ובארץ, אוי מקימי מעפר דם, מהשפות ירים אביון, אוי להושיבי עם נדיבי עמו. אוי מקימי מעפר דם, מהשפות ירים אביון, אוי להושיבי עם נדיבים, עם נדיבי